second, guys. I'm gonna check the feed and see why we're having issues here. Found it here. Give me just 1 second. Alright, that's still not better. What is going on here? We're gonna try it.
This is this between us.
The number one burgers in the world.
This is
the JBU.Show featuring Austin,
from the Miller Talk Podcast,
Allen,
the American Sincerest,
and now your host,
Cam Allen.
Our fun with these videos, we've sipped from the chalice of leftist suffering. We've satiated our thirst with the sweet nectar of liberal tears. But I do want to get serious for just one moment and offer a word of encouragement to these people. It may seem funny to us, but they are truly worried that Donald Trump will be an evil dictator. And I think it'd be irresponsible and frankly pretty cruel of me if I didn't take a second to reassure them on that point. So, you know, in all seriousness, all jokes aside, no, Donald Trump is not going to be an evil dictator. He's going to be a good dictator. So don't worry. Yes, Trump is going to be dictator for life. When he dies, his throne will be passed down to Baron Trump, and the Trump dynasty shall reign for 1,000 years. But it's all for your own good. Is Trump going to take away all of your rights?
For your own good, guys.
Absolutely not. Not all of them. you'll still have the right to agree with Trump and praise him always. Is Trump going to take away voting rights from women? Again, no. Women will have the right to vote for whoever their husbands tell them to vote for, which will always be Trump. Will Trump intentionally spray more CO2 into the air to cause more global warming, melt the ice caps intentionally, raise global temperatures to tropical levels? Yes, obviously. It's only the coastal states that voted against him in this election, and so now they must be drowned to pay for their sins. The rest of us get to enjoy warm summer weather all year round. So it's basically a win-win. So in that way, all of your fears are valid. And this was all laid out in Project 2025, like you said. It was all there. It's like on page 1. But it won't be as bad
Technically page 2, but
trust me, in a few months, you won't be complaining anymore because you won't be allowed to. And I hope that makes you feel better.
all right. How's it going, everybody? My name is Chris, and this is the JBU.Show. I was going through my old bookmarks today, trying to clear out some of the old ones because it wasn't letting me bookmark things, and I wasn't sure if that was because I had too many, because I have them going all the way back to when Biden was still president. Turns out that wasn't the issue, but I found a couple gems in there, so I figured I'd open the show with one of them. Yeah. So first and foremost, normally, kind of tease the main story and get to it a little later in the show, but I'm going to jump right into it here because I want to know what the hell has happened to all the damn pennies. Now, I understand we stopped making them. I'm clear. I understand that. I get it. There's 300 billion pennies in the country. Did they just disappear overnight? Is this the last penny on Earth? It'd be sad if it is, because this one's pretty messed up and it's only a couple years old. I don't understand why well, I do understand, and I'm going to tell you why. Every business has just decided, oh, they stopped making pennies. We just can't accept them anymore. Gonna have to go to rounding. Now, at first, a lot of people were upset about the rounding, and I'm like, it's really not that big of a deal. In the end
We've
of the
had
day,
our fun with these videos.
Oh, whoops, sorry. At the end of the day, with all your transactions, it should come out to basically the same, plus or minus, at worst, let's say $1 at the end of the year. However, I got to thinking about it. Shocking. And any system can be gamed, of course. And that is exactly why so many corporations immediately jumped on, okay, we just don't take pennies anymore. It really is that simple, and I'll explain it here in a second. Now, of course, there's also the fact that people heard they stopped making pennies, so they started hoarding them, right? So there's a little bit less in circulation, and that will kind of ease up here in the coming weeks, maybe months, as people realize, okay, the 300 billion pennies in existence won't just disappear overnight. But the reason that these corporations are doing this is it all comes down to pricing. How they price things determines how often they end up getting 1 or 2 pennies from you extra, or losing 1 or 2 pennies from you extra. And as we've learned from gift cards, and as we've learned from debit transactions and what's the other thing? There was one other thing, and I forgot it, but at least gift cards, pennies add up. They add up a lot. Oh, I was just going to say credit cards in general. 0.1% on all transactions is a lot when you do 1 million, 2 million, 10 million, 1 billion transactions in a year. And so if by setting your prices at certain amounts, ending in certain pennies, you can dictate, because the price is fixed. If there's tax in your state, tax is fixed. So you can dictate whether you're going to end up always receiving 2 pennies from the customer or sometimes having to give it back. Maybe not always, but at least you can get it in your favor more often than not. And that is what is happening. So I'll admit that a couple times I made the argument, it really doesn't matter. We're rounding to the nickel, it's going to work out in the end. But it doesn't, because you can game the system. And the only reason I started to look into this is because the greed of these places had to slap us in the face so violently. Again, we stopped making pennies not even a year ago. It was like a month ago that they actually stopped. But it's been 3-4 months now that places have already stopped taking them as if they all just magically disappeared. And their excuse is, we don't get them from the bank anymore. Well, why don't you get them from the bank? Well, because you're not giving any to the bank. Again, there's 300 billion pennies, pennies in circulation, possibly more. There's no shortage of pennies. There's no reason anybody needs to stop taking and or giving them yet. So this is the way it works. If the average place is rounding like this, right? So it's to the nickel. So if it ends in 0 or it ends in 5, you obviously just give a dime or a nickel or whatever, right? But if it ends in 1 or 2, you round down. If it ends in 3 or 4, you round up to 5 cents. If it ends in 6 or 7 cents, you round down to 5 cents. If it ends in 8 or 9 cents, you round up to 10. Now, that seems fair. Seems very fair. Each one of those has a 1 in 10 probability of coming up in the transaction, right? If the transactions are truly randomized, each one has a 1 in 10 chance of coming up. And therefore, at the end of the day, even though we all know probability doesn't work out perfectly, at the end of the day, over the course of 1 million transactions, you should be within, say, 1% of where you would be anyway. In reality, by setting their prices to 98 or 99 cents, a practice they had already been doing anyway, and there are other, it's not just 98 or 99 cents, but it also depends on the sales tax of that state. So if you have a different sales tax than, say, here in Washington, you might notice that the price of things no longer ends in 99 cents. Maybe it ends in 97. There's a reason for that. It's because they are predicting what the final cost is going to be, and therefore whether they need to round up or down. And my prediction is this will be such a windfall that they'll start doing the rounding on debit transactions, even though there's no shortage of non-existent virtual pennies. These are the types of things that I cannot stand. And the reason I can't stand them is because it gives a shred of credibility to nonsense socialistic arguments, to nonsense big government arguments. No, we don't need the government to come in and dictate this. Honestly, we could solve this really quickly by just making sure you have pennies on you. That is what you can do today. I've been telling you for a long time on this show, don't use your damn credit card or debit card. Now look, it's hard not to use a credit card. I get it, points, percentage, as long as you're responsible with your money, you can make money with it, and it's kind of stupid not to. So, take that for what it's worth on your side. You can still use the credit card, though, and use cash for literally anything else. You should never use a debit card. And the reason for that is because they're more and more trying to push people into digital currencies. And the harder that becomes easier and easier for them, the less people carry cash. They tried banning the $100 bill under Joe Biden. We lose all freedom, all of it, without cash and without the $100 bill even. We lose a big chunk of it just by not having the $100 bill. And the reason for that is you can no longer make large transactions without the government spying on you. Remember the other thing that Joe Biden did? He made it so the IRS can investigate your bank account if there are more than $600 worth of transactions. And that means if you ever had $300 in your bank account and then took it out, the IRS perpetually now has access to investigate your bank account. Before it was $10,000, I believe. Or you had to give them permission, one of the two. Which most people did anyway for their taxes, and that's fine, but this is what people don't understand, that people on the fringes have understood. Now look, these things have never affected me directly. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I don't really do anything that pushes the envelope anywhere. The closest I get to that is my interest in firearms. And so, because I live in a blue state, obviously that's not well liked by the government. So I get a tiny taste. But outside of that, people that have done things that the government doesn't particularly like, but that there is nothing illegal about, that is perfectly acceptable, moral, legal, all that, the government just doesn't like it, have understood for a long time. You can't let these things go. You can't let go of the ability to do transactions without the watchful eye over it. Even though you may only ever need to, one time in your life, make a transaction without the watchful eye of government, not because you're trying to do something illegal, but because whoever's in charge of the government at the time just happens to not like that in particular. Or maybe because you take $50,000 out of the bank to go buy a car or a trailer or a house. You get pulled over on the way, and the FBI just takes it, or the ATF or the local police department just takes it under asset forfeiture. Happens every day. No, it shouldn't, but it does. There's no understating how much these things matter. Even if you feel like they don't. Even if you think it will never apply to me. Hopefully, COVID has rid the average person of having that thought in general. But it can and it will. And you got to remember, you don't get to decide what is legal and what is not. You don't get to decide what is okay and what is not. Not when there's a regime that is willing to conform the rules to whatever they want, like we've had before and will have again. Barack Obama weaponized the IRS against Tea Party activists. Joe Biden weaponized the FBI against the Proud Boys. Those are just two examples, neither of which had committed any crimes. New York weaponized their legal system against Donald Trump for something that the mayor of New York admitted wasn't a crime and literally had to go on TV and announce, don't worry, literally everybody else that does business in New York, we know you've done this because it's not a crime. We're only trying to get Trump. She literally went on TV and said something exactly to that effect. We are only after Trump because they made the rules conform to what they needed. I know we've gone a long way down the road on pennies here, but the point is you should only operate in cash unless you absolutely have to. If you are not getting paid and immediately pulling all of that check out in cash, you need to start doing it. If for no other reason, the value of that dollar goes down every day it sits in your bank account. But I understand there's a lot of transactions you got to do digitally. I understand that it means you got to go to the bank more often and it's a pain in the ass and all of these things, blah, 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 blah. You don't lose rights that you don't exercise. Or you do lose rights that you don't exercise, sorry. You don't have rights that you don't exercise is what I meant to say. All right, enough lecturing. Let's see. We got a few stories tonight. More than a few, actually. I was gonna just to give you a few numbers to back up my my point here. A Canadian grocery store study found that the rounding, because they've been doing this for a lot longer in Canada, they stopped making their equivalent of the penny a long time ago. That grocery stores in Canada grossed about $3.27 million in CAD annually from rounding errors. Recent U.S. analysis from Richmond Fred in 2025 estimated symmetric rounding to the nearest nickel cost Newmers around $6 million nationwide. Now, keep in mind, that was during 2025 when this was relatively new. That was only for, like a couple months or whatever. I don't remember exactly when they stamped the last penny. Let me see. I actually have it right here. November 12th, 2025 was when they struck the last penny. So it was maybe like a month or two's worth of data. And again, once more people catch on to the fact that they can game the system like this, the estimates are essentially that average businesses will be able to scrape, tens of thousands of extra dollars each out of this. So, depending on the size of the business, nationwide corporations will be able to scrape millions out of it. In order to have a free nation, in order to have a free market, it has to be guided by morality. Ideally, Christianity. That is the morals that we have always based the West on. But it has to be guided by something, and we have to bully the shit. And yes, I mean exactly what I'm saying. We have to bully the shit out of companies and corporations that use unfair practices like this to their advantage. Because all it does is give ammo to people that want to use these excuses to tax us and to take our rights away. I saw an interesting meme the other day, and I don't have it to pull up on screen, but it said the weirdest thing about Back to the Future was recognizing that, what's his name, the bully, Buford? Is it Tannen or Tanner? Buford Tannen? I don't know, that sounds off, but whatever the bully's name is, was the good guy, and that getting rid of bullies was one of the biggest detriments to our society, because they helped enforce a role of normalcy and in preventing antisocial behaviors. Now, the preventing antisocial behaviors thing, I think there's a legitimate argument there. I've argued for a long time that bullying is a necessary aspect, and we cannot, first of all, we literally can't eliminate all bullying. Bullying still happens today. Now it just happens in the opposite direction, where the bullies are defending antisocial behavior instead of bullying people that are exerting antisocial behavior. What do I mean? I mean, if you're a trans kid, you beat the shit out of somebody that mocks you. Right? It's still happening. There's just excuses for it. And it's just opposite of what it used to be. So you can't get rid of it. Second, I've always said that it was a bad idea to try and eliminate all bullying because it is a necessary part of growing up. And I think maybe that is the underlying reason why, because it helps to curb antisocial behaviors in kids who are not having those behaviors curbed at home where they should be. I'm interested to know what you guys think on that. I'm going to do some research on it and see if I can find some like deeper studies and some deeper insight on that to bring to you guys. But I think that there is absolutely something there that is worth exploring. JBU@USA.com to send an email directly, or x.com/JBU_show, or of course you can leave a comment under the show. And actually, for those who are unaware, you can join the show anytime, like right now, literally, you can pop up right there in the little box next to me by following the Discord link that is attached to the show. Depending on where you're watching this, you might not see the Discord link, but if you go to Rumble and go to JBU.Show on Rumble, you will see the Discord link that will literally bring you to the Discord channel that I am recording this in right now. We always do this while we're live on Discord so that we can take calls from people, bring guests on, things like that. And of course, you can join the JBU Discord server as well if you just want to be a part of the chat and all of that over there. And talk with me and my co-hosts at first ALLAN 2, the American Sincerist, who should be joining me for tomorrow's show. And Austin from the Miller Talk podcast, millertalk.substack.com. He's also in there. So if you want to talk to any of us directly, you can do that. All right. Moving off the penny thing. Let's see. We got... let's do this story real quick. This isn't a big story, but it is one hell of a sad story. So this video made the rounds. I saw it on X at one point. I'm not sure how long it lasted there because X tends to be a lot quicker at drawing the truth out of things. By the way, I apologize for saying so much. I'm not sure why I'm doing that so terribly tonight. Nonetheless, on Facebook is where this story blew up, and worse than that, I followed the link to the Facebook, and you'll have to forgive me, I can't follow the link in front of you. I'm going to have to go get the video and then put it up on screen because it's connected to my actual Facebook, of course, and I don't want to dox myself. Anyway, the video is still regarded as true on Facebook, at least the one that they linked to in this article. Here's why that is not cool. Because this is a terrible fake video. So terrible, in fact, that Snopes had to call it out. 2 U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement agents destroyed their careers after arresting a black federal judge in her driveway without a warrant in Alexandria, Virginia. That is the claim on the video. Rating, of course, is false. In February 2026, posts circulated online claiming that U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents had destroyed their careers after arresting a black federal judge in her driveway without a warrant. One Facebook profile shared the claim alongside a 40-minute video titling the post, "ICE Agents' Careers Destroyed After Arrest of Black Federal Judge in Her Driveway Without a Warrant," yada, yada, yada. I don't need to go on to why it's fake. We're going to watch the video itself. So the video is 40 minutes. The actual, video portion of the event happening is only a few seconds, so that's what we're going to watch. But just note how quickly you realize that it's a fake video. And then remember the fact that still, months after this has been posted, it's being regarded as real. Oh, come on. Is there not a way? There's got to be a way for me to play this without doxing myself. Let me try this real fast, guys. Give me just 1 second here. It's going to be a pain in the ass. No, I don't want to log in. Hey, I got it. Okay. So, if I do that, and then we do that, and do that. I know this is thrilling for you guys. Perfect. All right, unfortunately, it's going to be small, so I'm going to put it up full screen so you guys can see it. And we should be good here. Oh, why is it blacked out? Oh, you got to be kidding me. It's completely blacked out.
And people like you always think you can talk your way out.
I haven't done anything.
Okay, let me try this instead then. Switch back to me since you're not looking at anything there. Let's go back to this one. And we're gonna... Oh, that's why it was blacked out. Never mind, I'm an idiot. Here we go. Try it again. Oh, no, wait. Yeah, no, that still doesn't work. Okay, never mind. We're going to do it this way then. We're going to go Brave. Why is it not switching back? I know, this is absolutely genius. I apologize, guys. I thought I had this set up earlier, and apparently I didn't. Match title, yeah, that's fine. Can I just cut it off this way? Of course not. Alright, whatever. Here you go.
Don't move! Step away from the car right now!
Officer, this is my home. What's going on?
I asked you a question. You fit the description, and people like you always think you can talk your way out.
I haven't done anything.
That's what you all say. Turn around before I make you.
You're making a serious mistake.
At 6:14 a.m. on a Saturday morning in Alexandria, Virginia,
That was the whole
inside one of the most exclusive gated communities in the D.C. metro
In the
area,
DC
a black woman stood alone in her
metro
driveway
area.
loading luggage into the back of a silver Lexus SUV. Her name was Nadine Ashford. She was 54 years old. She had been a United States federal judge for 11 years, appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate, and
Notice it
assigned to a
doesn't say
bench
what
where she had
president
handled hundreds of cases
or what
involving
year
constitutional law,
or
civil
any of
rights,
that, right?
and federal criminal.
Let me, why? That's why it's not. I'm gonna play the first part again real quick so you can see the actual video part.
Hey! Don't move! Step away from the car right now!
Officer, this is my home. What's going on?
I asked you a question. You fit the description, and people like you always think you can talk your way out.
I haven't done anything.
That's what you all say. Turn around before I make you.
You're making a serious mistake.
At 6
Literally the rest of the 40 minutes is just this narrator explaining in like the most ridiculous hyperbole the conflict. So
14
aside from the obvious, right? You might not be able to see it because you guys have to look at it in small screen there. But back here, the door on this SUV, there appears to be another door laying on top of it that is going from above the top of the vehicle to all the way down to the ground. You have the fact that it says that it was ICE or Border Patrol, ICE agent. This is a TSA uniform. And then it says police on the front, which is not necessarily abnormal. You have the fact that this is an unspecified vehicle that looks kind of like a Nissan, but definitely not. Well, I guess ICE has been driving random vehicles, so I shouldn't say that. This one also not particularly clear. This, of course, could be a Jeep Liberty or a Lexus. IS-300, it's hard to tell. You have the fact that he's kind of yelling more at the car than he is at the lady. This cop's standing over here doing nothing, right? And the fact that she's standing here, like, just in a weird position. Like, there's all sorts of reasons. And of course, the dialogue is just absurd. There's all sorts of reasons to recognize immediately that this is a BS video. And even if the video was real, 40 minutes of dialogue that is packed full of hyperbole like this is. I'll give you an example here in a second. I'm going to turn it down a little bit because it was awful loud. Should be a sign if they're only showing 10 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever it is, a video, and then going on for 40 minutes to explain the whole story behind it. That should be an indication that they're completely full of it. But again, 2,300 likes, 107 comments, and the overwhelming majority are good for you. Way to stand up to the bad guys. And this stuff does matter. We've reported all sorts of these things over the last few months, right? Ever since this stuff first started getting out of hand with ICE. The problem is people believe it. And they argue to the death that ICE is out murdering people in the streets. You have news reporters on mainstream media that are claiming all of these things are happening that have not actually happened. They come from BS like this.
A.m. on a Saturday.
I'm going to zoom forward
Behind
a little
him,
bit here.
through the front window of his home, his wife was already on the phone with 911, her voice shaking as she described what she was watching from her living room. Without a word of explanation, the agents began searching Ashford's vehicle. No consent was given. No warrant was produced. No inventory sheet was started.
What?
They opened the rear hatch and pulled out her suitcase, unzipping it on the driveway.
We can see that right
They
there.
went through her clothes, her toiletry bag, her shoes. They opened her purse and emptied it onto the hood beside her. Wallet, keys, lipstick, reading glasses,
funny,
case,
none of this happened
all
in
of
the
it
video.
spread out in plain view of the growing crowd. Then they reached the briefcase. It was a leather attaché case with a combination lock, which one of the
Ooh, what are they
agents
gonna
forced
find in
open.
there?
Inside were sealed federal court documents stamped with case numbers and classification markings, a judicial ID badge from the United States District Court, credentials issued by the Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts bearing her photograph, her name, and her title. Delano picked up the judicial ID and held it in front of his face.
I
He
bet
stared
felt
at it.
So stupid.
The photo matched the woman on the hood. The name matched the name she had given. The seal was authentic. Schofield leaned over his shoulder and read the credentials. The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but everyone watching felt it. The air shifted.
Whoa.
The truth was sitting in Delano's hand, laminated and embossed with the seal of the federal
You can see how ridiculous it is. No, well, I didn't mean to do that, but there's some cops doing the sea walk. The third one's not going to get in on it? Oh, well, that sucks. I kind of thought the third one was going to get in on it. Guess not. All right, let's check out Adam Savage too, since we're here.
Matt, when did you start making Wallies? This looks like the business end of a long association.
It has been. I think it was around 6 years ago when we started working on this guy.
Dude, 6 years. How many different Wallies have you built at this point?
This is number 2.5.
Okay. And tell me some of his main features. He drives around, right?
So he does move, yeah. He can drive, he can spin.
That's pretty cool.
Do that again. That sound is something else. Listen, I've made some robots and I've driven around some robots, but I've never heard a robot.
So I've mentioned before that the reason I keep the background blurred out and the reason there's actually a blanket right here, which I know I need to get something a little bit less ghetto, but is because my shop is in the same room as my computer here. And so there's tools and stuff all over the wall. This is a good example of what it actually looks like behind me, except not nearly this organized. I don't have Adam Savage money, so I don't have toolboxes for absolutely everything. But Adam Savage, in a sense, at least in my my creative sense, is what do they call that? A spirit animal or whatever. When I'm making stuff, I am every bit as scatterbrained as he is, and I am every bit as like hyper organized, but every inch of space is taken up. It is what it is. All right, sorry for the detour. So anyway, again, not a whole lot of importance on that story. Just remember, people around you are watching these things, and they believe that they are real. And I mention that because while it's fun to make fun of people online and all of that, and I do it too, like we all do it, it's hard not to sometimes. You got to remember too, though, in your daily life and with people you actually care about, with family, with friends, with people you interact with on a daily basis that do believe these things, you got to think about where you would be in that mindset if you believed it too. Because obviously, if any of us believed that ICE was actually the Gestapo out there, you know, just arresting American and killing American citizens, we'd be up in arms, right? We'd probably out there with our guns. The problem is they're not, and there's no reason to believe that they are other than these BS stories. And they are fed these stories on a morphine drip day in and day out. And they get more and more and more ridiculous. So it is important to remember, and that's why I try to mention them every now and then, that they believe these things, and you got to be able to come at them from the position of, I can see why you would feel that way believing what you do. Now show me what you're talking about. And then if they show you something like this, then go through it, right? Point out some of these obvious flaws with it. But try not to make it an insult to them, but more like a mutual, you're mutually angry that they have been duped by somebody. Because if you're just trying to insult them for how stupid they are, that's not how you win hearts and minds, right? And it is important to win hearts and minds of good people. Like, that does matter. Yes, it's fun to make fun of leftists and how stupid they are. But it does matter that we don't just write off the millions of good people that are duped by this stuff. Not the people that are perpetuating it, that know better, but the people that are duped by it, that are good people. We can't just write them off just because they're stupid. And obviously, not all of them are stupid. I shouldn't put it that way either, right? They're obviously not all stupid. They have other things going on just like the rest of us, and they can't spend all day investigating all these things. And they don't necessarily have the tools that you or I have developed to be able to look at a video like that and go, oh, this is obviously bull. Like, all right, enough defending leftists. Let's make fun of some.
There's really no polite way to put it. The climate crisis is killing people. It is knowingly, wittingly allowing people to die and infecting them with disease.
The climate crisis is knowingly letting people die.
And providing them with air that kills people, because we're not willing to take the steps necessary to do what we know we need to do. And every year now, millions of people around this planet are dying because fossil fuel and methane emissions, called greenhouse gas pollution, those methane emissions and CO2 emissions and nitrous oxide and other emissions are escaping into the atmosphere, being fed by the way in which we continue to choose to fuel our vehicles, propel our vehicles, heat our
so
homes,
it's actually
light
our
our factories,
fault.
and so forth.
Oh.
There's really no polite way to put it.
It's actually our fault because we continue to choose to fuel our vehicles and heat our homes and, fucking live. So, it's our fault we're killing ourselves by living. This is in response, of course, to the EPA undoing the CO2 things. So, this is really important. And going to that whole convincing good people on the left that they've been duped. We created the EPA, and this is the perfect way to sell it to them because it's true. We created the EPA back in the 70s when there were a lot of corporations doing a lot of terrible things like dumping, not necessarily nuclear waste, but dumping chemical waste into water tables and things like that, right? They were taking the cheapest route possible rather than necessarily the best route possible. That's not okay. We created the EPA to go after actual pollutants. When we're talking about the air, we're primarily talking about particulates from burning wood, for example, and burning coal too. But coal is obviously a lot cleaner, and coke too is a lot cleaner than even burning wood. If you see anybody today, and I think I've mentioned this before recently because I was thinking about it myself, somebody on my block was, they had a wood fire going, and the amount of smoke, at least here in Washington, because it is always so humid, and so when it's cold, somebody has a wood fire going because of the humidity. Anybody that is familiar with certain things will know that perfect amount of like cold and heavy humidity, it makes the smoke much more dramatic than it otherwise would be. And I was thinking about it. I'm like, what would it have been like when every house on this block was heating their home with wood, let alone every house in the city? It would have been awful. I mean, the amount of smoke that comes out of a normal fireplace, especially because these days nobody knows how to operate them correctly, and so they're generally operating at far too low of a temperature, and so they're not burning all of this stuff off. It's just blowing off into the air, which creates more smoke than necessary. A proper wood stove that is hooked up correctly, that is operating correctly, should burn fairly cleanly. But nonetheless, burning wood puts off a ton of particulate. And a lot of industrial processes back in the day used wood, they used coke, they used, runoff sawdust and things like that from other factories to burn, to make energy and do all sorts of things. A lot of factories require so much energy, it was just cheaper to just make it themselves on site by burning shit. And we created the EPA to deal with that. Because in places where there were a ton of factories and you had a lot of factories that were, not doing the right thing, they were just doing the cheap thing, it was creating problems in certain places. Now, of course, the problems were way more overblown than reality would dictate, but there was a legitimate problem to go after. This was, again, primarily particulates. Because inhaling particulates, and when you say particulates, it means just like a layman's term would be like bigger chunks of things in the air that like go into your lungs and build up, not gases, not anything like that, but unburnt pieces of stuff, different salts and constituents that end up being made in the fire and then blown out the stacks. I'm not exactly the person to explain this, so forgive my poor explanation here, but generally speaking, bigger things in the air itself. The particulate is what makes smoke, right? It's all the things in it. And then of course there are a bunch of hot gases, and that's what allows it to rise and all of that. But the actual density that you can see, you can't see gases, obviously, they're clear. But the actual density you can see is all the particulate that's inside of it. Nonetheless, the goal was to get rid of those things. CO2 was never one of those things. And the reason for that is because the air naturally consists primarily of oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide, or CO2. Now, there's a big problem with people conflating. In fact, Bill Maher did it the other day, and I mocked him for it on X. He conflated carbon monoxide with carbon dioxide. Carbon monoxide, CO, is a direct poison. It will kill you if you inhale it, even if it's not displacing the oxygen. CO2 can kill you too, but it's not a poison. CO2 can kill you only if it displaces or replaces enough oxygen. And so if you inhale only straight, you can inhale straight CO2. You'll pass out pretty quick because it doesn't have any oxygen in it, or very little. But it won't hurt you. You can take 2 deep breaths of it, immediately inhale some oxygen, and be just fine. Carbon monoxide is different. It's a poison. Inhaling it is bad for you, period. The genius thing that the Obama administration did, and we talked about it the other day when we talked about the EPA getting red-pilled, I think is what I titled it. They conflated CO2 as one of these dangerous gases, even though it has always been a significant portion of the atmosphere, even though it has always been a necessary gas for all life on Earth, including human life. And by doing so, now they have a reason to go after essentially anything they want, because CO2 is necessary for all life on Earth. Yes, CO2 has risen in the atmosphere a little bit, like 0.1% or something. I forget exactly what it is, but it's, a fraction of a percent over the last 50 years or whatever. All that is done is lead to more crops because plants breathe CO2, right? The Earth does this crazy thing. The other thing that they don't mention is since the 1970s, the actual green coverage on Earth, the amount of green plants that exist, has gone up about 79%. Almost like, and I know this is a wild theory, but it's almost like the Earth automatically adapts. CO2 goes up, more plants are grown, they convert that CO2 into more oxygen, less CO2, less plants, cycle continues. I think a lot of us are not aware. The Dark Ages were in part called the Dark Ages, and forgive me if I'm conflating the Dark Ages and maybe it was some other time, but I'm 99% sure it was the Dark Ages. I know years better than I know the names for things, but I'm 99% sure it was the Dark Ages. But part of the reason they were called the Dark Ages is because there was no food. And that was because there was very little CO2 in the air and very little sun. Plants didn't grow. Crop yields were terrible. And of course, we didn't know what we know today, where now, if we had no CO2 in the air, we'd probably still do okay. We'd have to build a ton of greenhouses, but we'd probably do okay because we know exactly what everything takes. We can synthetically account for it one way or another. That's why fertilizer makes plants grow. Because if the soil is lacking or the air is lacking one of these necessary nutrients, we just make up for it with, a different method. Anyway, the point is, they conflated CO2 with these particulates, with all of the things that we actually created the EPA for. But CO2 has always been a part of the atmosphere. It has always been part of the cycle of life. It is not poisonous. It is not deadly. Whether or not it actually is leading to an overall rise in temperatures is highly debated, despite the fact they act like it's settled science. Whether or not humans can do anything to directly combat it in any sort of way that will ever have any effect at all is even more hotly contested, despite what they claim. Even if we did cause it, it is even more contested that we can do a damn thing about it. And there are negative repercussions to trying. Lots of them, including lower crop yields, which means less people eat. I mentioned this the other night. We are carbon life forms. If you give the government the ability to regulate carbon, which is the C in CO2, what are you giving them the power to regulate? I understand that's a little bit reductive, but it is true. Let me give you another example here of the way that they manipulate these these facts. Long story short is what the EPA did the other day in reversing the CO2 rules, not going to affect the environment at all. Not going to affect the amount of particulate in the air. It's not going to make it more dangerous to breathe the air or any of that nonsense. All it's going to do is get rid of the burdensome regulations that never should have been put in place. Carbon monoxide is still going to be regulated. All of the other poisonous gases and particulate gases, or not gases, but particulate matters, are still regulated and covered by the EPA. The CO2, which is, again, I can't say it enough, never something that anybody wanted regulated for any reason, is the only thing that was affected. So this video here is from the AP talking about glaciers in Italy, and I just want to highlight a couple things. Now look, I'm not arguing the outcome of the video, right? I'm not arguing what they claim is the outcome is wrong. I just want to show you how they manipulate the images, how they manipulate what they are saying, and that alone should give you enough reason to question what they claim the outcome will be.
A glacier is a body of ice that is moving over the mountain from the upper zones to the lower zones. Is formed by ice that originates from snowfall. We are observing a shrinkage of all the glaciers in Italy and worldwide.
I've seen that firsthand.
Sounds
what
terrifying.
global warming has done. I've been skiing on glaciers since I was 9 years old, and most of the glaciers that I used to ski on are pretty much gone.
We have more ice that melts in summer compared to the snow that accumulates in winter. We quantified a reduction in 60 years of about 1/3 of the Italian glacier areas. And in addition, we are observing that during the last decades, there is an acceleration of the shrinkage. The glaciers are a very complex systems because are important for the biodiversity. In addition, are fresh water and so are crucial for the driest and hottest part of the year. Then from an economical point of view, because the fresh water fed the dams, so the hydropower, we can modify our lifestyle and we can reduce our emissions. And our very little contributions means instead a big modification in the emissions if we consider at the global scale.
Okay. That's the video. Now I'm going to highlight two things in particular here. All right. So this one I can't really tell you anything. First of all, even look like the same area. Because you can see here that it changes a lot more drastically than they claim. It does look like this is the same mountain on the right and on the left. But the reason I can't tell you anything about this one is there's no month. Pay attention to the month. The next one right here, this would be September 17th, 2009. Let me check something real quick. It doesn't matter, but I am curious. Let me just 1 second. Okay. September 22nd, 2009. That was the beginning of fall. Oh, shoot. Sorry, I can't do that, or you guys are going to end up getting glitchy results. Okay. So this is September 17th, 2009. This is the same area. Did you catch the difference right there? First of all, you see how this is all whited out up here? And it's not whited out here? Look at that again. White, not white. White, not white. That's because the image has been digitally altered. To highlight the white in this photo, and not to highlight it in this photo. Now, we can still clearly see that there is less snow. Of course. August 13th, 2025. What's the difference between August 13th and September 17th, even though those dates sound incredibly close together? Especially when you're talking about over the course of 16 years of difference. This is the peak of summer. Melting season. This is not the peak of winter, but it is after, it's 2 days before the beginning of fall. It is after the snow has started falling. That's even more dramatic when we go forward a little bit. And they do that all the time, where they'll show you pictures of, look how big the ice caps were in 2001, and look how tiny they are now. And what they're showing you is a picture of the dead of winter in 2001 and the dead of summer in 2025 or whatever year. Most people might not be aware of this, but the ice melts and regrows every season. So let's go forward to the next one. Right here. So as we can see, this just looks like one big melting away. What does that claim there? It claims it's from 2019, 2023, now whatever that is. Okay, so what we're looking at here is July 16th, 2023, and it starts, there you go, July 16th, 2019. And so what we're seeing is the peak of melting season. So starting in 2019, it is June, July, August. Look at that. Ends August 9th. Doesn't go into September. Weird. 2020. This time we start all the way in May. That's, keep in mind, that's because the seasons change a little bit every year. June, July. Oh, that one did hit September a little bit. Although that looks like it was more like an incorrect date, because it jumps all the way from July 9th, 17th, 24th, July 24th to September 15th, 2020, and then 2021. So that's weird. Anyway, this would be, looks like January 20th. Oh, no, June 23rd. July. And then 5/23, May again, June, July, June, July. So they're only showing you the peak melting. And so what it is showing is, yes, at the peak melting point, it melted a little farther down. But here's what they're not showing you. At the peak freezing point, there was more snow than there usually is. So yes, it did go one extreme in as far as at the peak of each summer, it did melt down lower and lower a few times, or a few years in a row. Believe me, they picked the years they picked for a reason. But it also, at its peak growing time, dead of winter, grew bigger than ever before. And then we've talked about this before too. So again, I'm not necessarily arguing what they claim all this means. What I'm showing you is the way that they are manipulating your interpretation of what's happening versus what is actually happening, which is, yes, there is more melting, but there is also more freezing. That is undeniable. We have had records amount of snow in the North Pole for the last several years. There are more polar bears now than ever. So many, they're considering an open season on them in Canada because they're killing too many people. We were told they were all going to be gone by now. Some of you might be too young to remember. The point is, I don't know what the point is. I had a point. That's what it was. The other thing, not a point, but the other thing is, the reason that 2020, 2021, 2022, and I believe 2023, I think it was those 3 years that were the hottest years in recent memory. Notice they always say in recent, the hottest years since recording. Well, if you're unaware, we have only had a sufficient amount of data since the late 1970s. We have only had complete or somewhat complete data since the late 1990s. That is a very small period to try and tell us that they know what the climate is doing. Not the weather, the climate. Think of how well they can predict the weather. Not well. But they can predict the climate, even though they can't predict the weather. You should also be aware that there has never been a single climate model produced that predicts catastrophic cooling, catastrophic warming, or anything catastrophic that has ever accurately predicted the weather. So they've been making climate models since the 1970s. Many of those models have predicted catastrophic cooling or catastrophic warming. Many haven't, too, by the way. There are many that predict, the weather's pretty stable. Might get a little bit warmer, might get a little bit cooler, and then it'll go through another cycle. They don't talk about those ones. What gets reported on is the one model that happens to show catastrophic warming in 100 years. But that model, let's say it was, this is a particular model that was reported on in the year 1985 because it predicted catastrophic cooling, which is what they were predicting at the time. Now it's catastrophic warming. Well, now it's just catastrophe, but it was catastrophic warming a few years ago. Since 1985 till now, that model completely failed to predict the weather patterns, meaning it didn't even come close to accurately predicting the weather or the climate, whatever, in the time that has elapsed, 50 years almost. So why would we assume that it's correct 100 years from now? But 2020 through 2023, hottest years on record since the 1930s. Not that long ago. They always start the charts in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, when it was much cooler than it is right now. And that is the easiest way. That's why it's so easy to manipulate people on this, because it just depends on where you start the chart. If you start the chart in the 1930s, then it looks like we're just now getting back to average temperatures. If you start the chart in the 1950s, just after the hottest years on record, it looks like temperatures are soaring because we started at a low period. See how that works? We go back even further, things look pretty stable. Regardless, again, I'm not trying to argue that I know what the climate is or that climate change isn't real and that I can prove it. I'm only trying to show you the ways in which they are absolutely lying. Another thing happened in 2020 that most people are unaware of and that climate scientists warned, screamed to the hills, was going to cause excessive heat for those several years. It ended up being about 3, but they didn't know exactly how long. They just knew it was going to cause excessive heat for a period of time. All ships since the beginning of, since the end of the 19th century, the 1800s, when we started shipping things with steam-powered ships, i.e. burning coal to generate steam, a major constituent of the particulate matter that came out of those burners was sulfur. A bunch of sulfur in the air cools the atmosphere. Because almost everything on this planet is moved by ships, which burn bunker oil because it's cheap. Bunker oil is one of the leftover oils after the refining process and is one of the cheapest overall constituents because about the only thing you can do with it is burn it. So that's what ships primarily burned. Now, more often they use natural gas because it burns a lot cleaner and it has a higher energy density. But bunker oil is what 90% of the ocean-going ships on the planet still use. It's just brand new ships that run on natural gas. The Western countries got together and they banned any ship that is burning bunker oil from coming into their ports. So that means for 150 years, we had these massive plumes of sulfur going into the air, primarily around the equator, because that is where most of the ships end up going back and forth. Right on either side of it. I don't know why that is, other than that's just like where most ports happen to line up, is like right around the equator. You would think they would go like more towards the poles because it's shorter trips. I don't know. All I know is that they happen to go, if we take a look at shipping lanes here, matter of fact, I'll pull it up because it'll help. It really helps illustrate this photo, or this picture. Let's see. Map of shipping lanes. No, that's not the right one. Sorry, I've got to not only find one, but find one I can actually pull up big enough on screen that you guys can see it. Huh, World Economic Forum. Wouldn't that be a great place to get the map from? Nope, those won't work either. Oh my goodness. And I apologize. I said the equator. The equator was not what I meant. I meant band, like the central band. And I understand what I'm describing as the equator. Just look at the damn photo. As you can see, the vast majority is right here. It is right in this central band between North America and Europe and the top of Africa, and between Asia and North America. Consequently, if you look at temperature charts, I think it was temperature, from those years, what you will see is this is primarily where it got hotter. And that's because after 150 years of ships dumping sulfur into the air and then just stopping all at once, it allowed the sun to penetrate the atmosphere a lot more clearly. Brought temperatures up. Now again, not a scientist. This is not like my forte to explain all of the technicalities. I'm giving you generalities. I've done shows on this previously where we go through all of the details and stuff. That's not what I'm trying to do because, again, I'm not trying to argue the outcome. I am simply giving you the ways in which they are bullshitting you. It's on you if you want to look this up further. So anyway, when I think it was either the WEF or the UN when they were contemplating banning the bunker oil, and there were several scientists that told them, if you do this and you ban it all at once, it will lead to a massive spike in temperatures. That's exactly what it did. But everybody acted like they had no idea why it was so hot all of a sudden. It's really frustrating when you start stacking these things on top of each other like that because it becomes so obvious that they are taking something that may be true and making catastrophe out of it when there is no reason to make catastrophe out of it. So far, we have done nothing except benefit from climate change. By the way, in case you weren't aware, claim is the oceans are rising. Do you know that the land mass here in Washington, for example, I don't know why they claim here in Washington and not elsewhere. I didn't look into it. I just heard this little interesting tidbit. They had to explain why the ocean wasn't rising here in Washington because people obviously noticed nothing's changed. There's millions of houses along the beach. They know that water is not magically in their living room now. And you watch videos, you know, they'll talk about, oh, the oceans are rising, and they'll show clips of houses falling down out in Virginia and stuff, South Carolina, because they built these houses in the water. They're literally on massive stilts. They don't keep up the maintenance on the damn stilts or whatever they're called, the pilings. And during a storm, when there's a lot of water pushing back and forth, they fall over. It's not the climate. I mean, you can blame it on the fact that there was a storm, sure. But it was the fact that man built a house over the water. And so they had to explain why the oceans weren't rising here in Washington. So you know what the explanation is? The land is rising with it. Could be true. I don't see why it wouldn't be. I don't see why it would be. But again, I'm not a scientist. But what that does mean, if it is true, if all of that is true, the oceans rose and the land rose with it, is all the catastrophe about being underwater by now was meaningless, unnecessary, not needed. It's just like your own life. Even if all of it is true, catastrophizing over it, screwing ourselves and our economy by taking away oil, the single most important thing that we all need to live, At least if there's going to continue to be 7-8 billion of us. It's not just pointless. It has negative impact directly. Yes, a lot of bad things can happen to you in your personal life. You could walk out the front door and get hit by a car, struck by lightning, killed by a cow flying through the air from a tornado. Weirder things have happened. All of that could happen. A power line that you're walking under could just snap and fall on you, dead. By the way, I've seen something very similar to that happen. Awful. Guy didn't die, but ooh. The point is, worrying about those things and basing your life, basing your decisions off of those catastrophes or catastrophic outcomes is a terrible idea. You will never get anything accomplished ever. Doing the same for our society is no different. That's my opinion. Either way, it is clear that they are lying. You know, you can decide what that's worth or what that's not worth. But either way, it is clear that they are lying, and it is clear, to me at least, that it doesn't matter. Real or not, the best thing we can do is continue to progress, continue to innovate, and continue to adapt. You'll notice the other thing he mentioned, and I promise I'll try not to go on as long a tirade about this one, but you'll notice the other thing he mentioned there was methane. Why are they going after methane all of a sudden? We haven't heard anything about methane until the last couple years. It's all to go after the meat. We heard them say it at the WEF less than 10 years ago. We heard the guy, I played him yesterday, I played him a couple days ago, talking about using human engineering to make people allergic to meat. To be honest, I don't know. I don't know why they have this big concern about it. I have my guesses, but I don't have a solid answer on why they have a concern about it. But the methane gas thing and making that the next big enemy is all about going after the meat. It's all about going after cows, because cows are the #1 producers of methane. Do you know what methane is? If you're unaware of this, it's primarily hydrogen. Methane, just like all other forms of, usable gases, methane is also one of the things we get from oil. It's a hydrocarbon, meaning hydrogen molecules, carbon molecules. It's natural gas. Methane and natural gas are the same thing. And yes, it is produced in farts. It also is produced from decomposing matter. If you've ever been in a swamp before, you might have seen methane bubbles coming up from under the swamp, sometimes huge ones. There have been ones that have killed men before, because they get this massive bubble of methane that was forming from all the decomposing matter down at the bottom of the lake, came up, boom. It obviously can explode, or it can displace too much oxygen. Methane, unfortunately, is a entirely odorless gas. That might be surprising to you if you have natural gas stoves or whatever in your home, but they add that scent to it. It's completely odorless, and it is a poison. kind of like carbon monoxide. But it's also an extremely important fuel. It is more energy dense than just about anything else we use right now. It's more energy dense than coal. It's why we should have moved everything to natural gas by now. It is also the most plentiful fuel on Earth. And that's why people spent so much time trying to figure out how to replace oil with methane. Because if you can replace oil with methane, you can keep all of the internal combustion engines, all of the traditional methods of modern society, and not have any reliance on oil. Methane is easy to produce. You just need a bunch of dead stuff. We literally burn methane off of our dumps because they produce massive amounts of methane. It is very easy to produce. On top of that, there are these huge masses called clathrates. I think it's clathrate. Let me check real quick. I got it written down here. Yeah, clathrates. These massive structures of clathrates in the ocean. There's been 7, I think, discovered so far. There's believed to be a couple hundred. And very, 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 very deep in the ocean are these massive clathrates that are basically big-ass ice structures. But it's not normal ice. It's frozen methane, natural gas. And it doesn't require anything special to harvest because it's literally just sitting there. You don't have to dig. You just have to be able to send more or less a big-ass straw all the way down to the bottom and then blast it with steam, and the gas comes up the tube. That's why synthetic oil, so like synthetic oil for your car, used to be like 3 times as much as conventional oil. Now, it's often cheaper. Now, not necessarily if you go to Jiffy Lube, because Jiffy Lube obviously wants you to buy the premium, better natural gas-based oil. That's, if you weren't aware, that's what synthetic oil is for your car. It's from natural gas. And that's why it's cleaner generally too. But that's why it has gotten as cheap as it has before. Because natural gas is far more plentiful than even oil. And is generally gotten as a byproduct. So when they find oil, there's usually a massive amount of natural gas with it too. It's usually both. Again, not my exact forte, so I can't give you perfect details on all this stuff, but I do have a general understanding of a lot of it. And a lot of all the places that we found oil back in the early 20th century, a lot of it turned out to be natural gas. But we've also figured out how to use natural gas to replace oil and the constituents that we get from oil a lot. So the cracking process, which is where we take oil and we break it into all its individual components, they have also figured out, because all of those components are hydrocarbons. So again, that's carbon atoms and hydrogen atoms. They're all built off of different arrangements of carbon and hydrogen atoms. Because they all have carbon and hydrogen atoms and nothing else, generally speaking, there is sometimes, but generally speaking, nothing else, it's just different amounts. You know, it can be 2 carbon and 4 hydrogen per molecule. It can be 50 carbon and 100 hydrogen per molecule. And anything in between, right? And it goes on and on. It's not technically forever, but it goes on and on for a lot. Regardless, they have figured out how to essentially make whatever constituent they want from the most simple hydrocarbon. They can take the simple hydrocarbons, like natural gas, which I believe is 1 carbon, 2 hydrogens, It's either that or it's 2 carbons, 4 hydrogen. One of the two. But it's one of the most simple hydrocarbons. And they can take it and they can produce almost any more complex hydrocarbon out of it. It's a big deal. But because of that, our reliance on oil is almost completely non-existent anymore. We don't talk about it that way, but it is true. And natural gas, when it's burned, produces water. And that's about it. A little bit of carbon, a little bit of CO2. Again, a little bit of CO2. Let me see real quick. Keep in mind, we have only understood the chemistry of these things, the atomic level of these things, meaning the atoms. We've only understood them for about 100 years. We've only had a reasonable working theory of them for about 125 years. And we've only had a working knowledge of them, meaning we didn't necessarily know exactly how it all worked, but we were starting to get certain answers and we were able to put things together, even if we didn't quite understand how it worked, for about as old as America is, about 250 years. Back in the late 1700s is when chemistry really started to become a fixed science, and physics obviously followed with it. Physics technically goes back a lot farther because people understood other aspects to physics, gravity, and things like that. But as far as atoms and stuff relate to physics, that all started shortly after we discovered that everything is made up of elements. Regardless, let's see. So there are about 422 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere at any given time, roughly. Now keep in mind, it's constantly cycling. The claim is that it's risen from 280 parts per million in 1900 to 420 parts per million today. The claim is that the rise primarily due to human activities, especially the burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, except again, there has been a 70-some% increase, whatever I said before, in total green coverage on the planet since the 1970s. The rate of increase, they claim, is 30,000% faster than it naturally would be. Right. So anyway, there was a reason I looked that up, but hell if I can remember what it was now. I got too many things going on in my head. See, this is why I generally have a co-host, because they help keep me on track. The point is, there's no way for us to know that our measurements in 1900 of 220 parts per million were accurate. And they'll claim, well, we can take ice cores, and by taking ice cores, we know what it was before. But we don't. We think we do. But just because that carbon is trapped in the ice doesn't mean for a fact that it's measured the same way as if it wasn't trapped in the ice. It doesn't mean that the ice didn't trap more or less carbon than was actually in the atmosphere. There's all sorts of different things that could play into that. And while we were trying to figure out the constituents of the atmosphere back in the year 1900, and we had pretty good answers. We could weigh molecules back then, even though we couldn't see them yet. We could weigh them. We were able to use essentially mathematics to determine these things. It doesn't mean that our instrumentation was correct. It doesn't mean that a mistake wasn't made. All sorts of things. And that's where it goes with the temperature, too. Now, I understand with the carbon, I'm not necessarily questioning that. I am questioning whether or not it was actually 280 parts per million in 1900, and that 420 parts per million represents anything other than natural change over that time. But I'm not necessarily questioning whether or not that was entirely accurate. Fine, again, it's not my forte. Maybe there's some aspects there that I'm just not aware of that give us a little more confirmation. But I am arguing that there is no doubt that they have manipulated the temperatures and that we don't have complete data for anything past the late 1970s. And so it's entirely speculation. And you might say, we know what the temperature was in the 30s, for example. Yeah, we do. In very specific places, taken at specific times, with equipment that we cannot guarantee was accurate. Now, in the 1930s, when we're starting to get to that point, the accuracy was good enough, right? It was pretty good. But the farther back we go, the quicker and quicker that accuracy drops down. And the fewer and fewer places had somebody that had the sufficient knowledge, not the intelligence, but the sufficient knowledge, because remember, the only way to share intelligence back then was via book and mail, that could actually record the temperature accurately, and did. It continues to dwindle the farther back we go. My point is, this stuff is not nearly as black and white as they make it out to be. All right, enough on my climate spiel. That was way more than wasn't necessary to discuss. I ended up saying a lot of dumb shit when I'm just spouting like that. Anyway, since we're talking about it on the EPA thing, there's a story today from NBC. Public health and green groups sue EPA over repeal of greenhouse gas rule. Why do we do this? Why do we allow this? A coalition of health and environmental groups sued the EPA on Wednesday, challenging its determination last week that revoked a scientific finding that has been the central basis for U.S. action to regulate greenhouse gas emissions and fight climate change. So again, if you didn't watch the EPA episode, the ruling was called, let me see if it says it right here, the endangerment finding. And what it was the Obama administration got some scientists to say, on the EPA's behalf, that CO2 caused climate change. Climate change can lead to bad health outcomes for Americans, and therefore the 1977 Clean Air Act gives us permission to regulate anything that emits CO2. It was absolute nonsense, and it was an end run around Congress to avoid having to create a new law to regulate CO2, which of course would be unconstitutional. They just skipped that altogether, also allowing them to skip the Supreme Court arguments, and said, well, the scientists say it's true, therefore it is, and therefore it affects potential health outcomes for Americans, and therefore that gives me the authority under the CAA from 1977 to regulate it. It was nonsense. It was bullshit to begin with, even if it's true. Laws are supposed to be passed by Congress. The CAA says nothing about CO2. Therefore, Congress should have passed a law. And so the Trump administration went, this is ridiculous. We never had the authority to do this. We're getting rid of that authority. If Congress wants to pass a law, Congress can pass a law. Of course, he's the evil dictator authoritarian who just takes power instead of gives it away. But as in many other cases, this is him giving away the government's power that doesn't exist. If Trump really was an authoritarian dictator, the last thing he would do is give up something like the endangerment finding that basically gives him permission to control every industrial regulation in the nation. If he really was a fascist, like Hitler was, what was one of the first things, I shouldn't say the first thing, but what was one of the first things that Hitler did? Took control of government regulations in order to get every major corporation in the country under his thumb. That's what Obama did with the endangerment finding. And if Trump was trying to do that, he would never eliminate something like the endangerment finding, which gave him that ability. And ironically, would be cheered by leftists. I almost wish, at this point, I was thinking about it the other day, I almost wish that Trump's second term, he just became a rabid leftist and did all of the terrible things none of us want him to do on the right. Because leftists would have been forced to argue against him. Because I truly believe that the TDS, I truly believe in TDS. I'm not one for, making up names and, I don't call Newsom Newscum and all of these things. And I don't have any problem with the jokes either, to be clear. It's not what I do. Okay? But I do believe that TDS is a legitimate condition and that there are people that just utterly lose all sense of reality at the mention of Trump's name. And so they would have been forced to argue against these things, allowing us to ban them permanently forever. See what I'm saying? It would have been the perfect play. Unfortunately. I won't deny it's a risky play, but I honestly think the TDS is bad enough that it could have worked. A rule finalized by the EPA on Thursday rescinds the 2009 government declaration known as the endangerment finding that determined carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases threaten public health and welfare. Obama-era finding is the legal underpinning of nearly all climate regulations. Under the Clean Air Act for motor vehicles, power plants, and other pollution sources that are heating the planet. The repeal eliminates all greenhouse gas emission standards for cars, trucks, and could unleash a broader undoing of climate regulations on stationary sources such as power plants and oil and gas facilities. One can only hope, because the other point that I was getting to, and I know I didn't end up getting there with what John Kerry said, is literally every advancement that we made in the 20th century was based on the chemistry of oil. All modern medicine, almost every single part of a modern hospital, the equipment, the technology, the medicine, and just like practically speaking, the plastics and all of that involved, all based on oil. There is almost nothing in our daily lives. Computer chips, many other computer components, oil, and of course, precious metals and stuff too, none of which we would be able to feasibly retrieve without heavy equipment, heavy machinery, which doesn't just operate on diesel. You also have hydraulic fluid, comes from oil. Natural gas comes from oil and from drilling. Coal. All steel comes from coke, which is coal. Literally everything about modern life comes from oil one way or another, even if it's just its ability to get to your doorstep via diesel fuel. Everything. It's not just about your car. Everything is based on oil. And the reason they're going after oil is the same reason they're going after CO2. Because they are going after people. It is my sincere belief, and it is based on their own words, not magic sorcery, but what they say, what they espouse at the WEF and elsewhere, including on record. It is my sincere belief that what they want is a single global order that, of course, they believe they will have control of, where the elites are in charge and regular people, all the idiots, just do what they say. And we'll all have better lives because we just do what they say. Because the elites know better. A lot of other societies believe that too. Most recently, Russia, China, Rome, Egypt, France. There are many. Again, history, not my forte either. That's more ALLAN. But he's not with us at the moment, so I can't ask him what other ones. It almost always comes back to the elites, which is kind of funny. But the Georgia Guidestones, for example, they laid out essentially this exact theory. And this theory comes from the 1970s. When did all these people come of age? All the people that are in power right now that like John Kerry, like Joe Biden, like Kamala Harris, like Nancy Pelosi? 1970s. And what it says is that the earth should be limited to roughly 3 billion people, because when we exceed 3 billion people, that's when we start getting too polluted and all of this stuff. And that a one world government could only feasibly control about 3 billion people. Basically, their belief system is that there should be a limited number of people on the planet. The elites, the highly educated elites, should run everything, should control the lives of these 3 billion people, but these 3 billion people will be happy about it. You will own nothing and be happy because the elites know better. That in doing so, we could have world peace and all of human knowledge basically could be put towards whatever goal we want, which would get us there faster. Not because of competition, but because we're all working together. It all just completely ignores human nature. I'm going to need to sit down and put all that stuff in a list and really hammer out what I think their ideology, like what are all the exact tenets of the ideology that have so far been publicly espoused. But a lot of it comes down to what was written on the Georgia Guidestones. In my personal belief, the person that blew up the Georgia Guidestones wasn't somebody that hated him. Which there was plenty of good reason to hate him. Because it essentially said you need to murder 5 billion people in order to have a moral planet. They believe that the planet is immoral so long as there are too many people and we are strip mining and things like that. But I don't think it was somebody that hated them that blew them up. I think it was somebody that agrees with them and know they didn't want that record standing there. That's my personal belief. Anyway, as far as the EPA and the lawsuits are concerned, I don't really need to read any more of this. Why do we allow this? Why do we allow these eco-terrorists, these NGOs who don't represent people, they represent business interests, and sometimes they represent foreign business and government interests, to sue our government, meaning our taxpayers, often leading to the creation of law or the absence of law, as in this case, that was voted for by the people. But then 20 nut jobs with enough money in their pocket are able to sue and get it stopped against the will of the people. That was never part of our system. It's certainly not part of the system the founders created. It would have never allowed anybody to just be able to sue the government to stop a major project that was for the benefit of the people. That's absurd. You can sue the government for redress of your grievances, not to stop public works projects like a dam being built or coal being burned to warm houses just because you don't like it. And even worse, to allow foreign companies and foreign interests, foreign government interests in some case, to sue our government, not just over the EPA stuff, but over lots of things. But it's almost entirely through environmental bullshit laws, because when they passed these laws, that was the point of the law in the first place, was to allow this shit. To allow unelected, unaccountable, private individuals, not even based in this country in some cases, to manipulate our government via one corrupt judge into doing whatever it is they want done. And we just allow it. And I don't understand why. Why? It's not in the Constitution. It's not one of our rights. Because there is absolutely no way for it not to infringe on everyone else's right. So it can't be a right. A lot of people say you cannot have a right that is based on someone else's labor. That is true. But that's not actually the core principle. The core principle is you cannot have a right that necessarily violates someone else's right, including their labor. That fundamentally is not what a right is. A right exists in the absence of everything else. In the absence of government, in the absence of other people, the right still exists. Your right to defend yourself from something or someone attacking you exists whether or not there's a police force, whether or not there's a government, whether or not there's another human being on earth. You still have the right to defend yourself if a bear attacks you. What you don't have is the right to sue the government for enforcing a law put in place by the duly elected representatives of the people. I might disagree with my co-host that protests and rallies are that effective. But I do agree with him that conservatives have got to start getting more angry about shit. Not violent, angry. And start doing something. Run for office. Call, write letters, show up, put pressure on these idiots, who, by the way, are every bit as stupid as you think they are. Yes, there are some smart ones at the top pulling the strings, but the ones that are the faces, meaning the Congress members, the politicians, they're the faces, right? They're not the ones pulling the strings. They're just people that agree with the people pulling the strings. They're fucking idiots, by and large. Allow me to demonstrate. I suppose I already did with John Kerry, but I have more examples. Rest assured. Oh, I better have more examples. Where are they? What the hell? Stand by, guys. This one? It's not that one. Well, here we go. Here's, in the absence of finding the other one at the moment, here's AOC acting like an idiot again.
No matter what he's
I don't think this is new, by the way. This is a little bit older, but
doing, that house doesn't belong to him, New York. It belongs to us. It belongs to the people of this country. And I want us all to remember and to know.
Sorry to interrupt before she gets to the funny part. Notice they always talk about code switching, right? People are always code switching to fit in with black guys and everything else. Why is it that the people that always talk about that are always the ones that do it the most? Keep watching.
That the future, our future, is not determined
I can't roll
by
my
a
R's.
despot in a house built by enslaved people. Our future will be determined not in a house built by slaves, but in a city built by freemen, in a city built by unionists and immigrants. And
Look at this guy the whole time. He is absolutely coming to the realization that he has been duped and he should not be here.
suffragists, the bricks laid
He's
by
like,
working
oh, that's
people,
not what I thought
past,
it was.
present, and future, the seamstresses and the
Fucking
unionists who paid for our rights in blood. This city was built by the Irish escaping famine, Italians fleeing fascism, Jews escaping Holocaust,
Look at him.
Black
Are
Americans
you guys cheering
fleeing
for this?
slavery and Jim Crow, Latinos,
Oh, damn it, he's nodding now. He
Native
is an
people
idiot.
standing for themselves, Asian Americans coming together in Queens, in Brooklyn, in the
God.
Bronx, in Manhattan, in Staten Island, in this country, in a vision to build the freest, toughest, and greatest city on earth, and we will not stop now, New York. It is no surprise. NYC, baby, NYC. It is no surprise.
Is it just me? Like, that physically hurts my ears. And I'm not just trying to be a dick. Like, it literally hurts my ears. And I don't just mean when she started popping the mic from screaming too loud. Which, by the way, how many microphones has she been in front of? It is not hard to know how to yell into a microphone and not have it pop. I digress.
As they
just for fun, since that was a rally for Zorhan, I'm going to go ahead and throw this one in there.
What we'd rather do is ensure that they remain as they are so that the city can be on firm financial footing. However, in order to get to this point of closing the gap on both this fiscal year and the next fiscal year, we are forced to raid the rainy day fund, the retiree health benefits trust reserve, and to increase property taxes across these other years.
But don't worry, this will only affect people that are living in New York. Shit. Look, I got level with you. So we sort of said a lot of things, like maybe the free buses thing and freezing rents. We're not going to do any of that stuff anymore. Kidding, that was color war breakout. We're going to do a new thing, I think, where it's more like we're going to try and raise money and then raise taxes, and it will all trickle down to everybody. So if you're in the upper class making more than $122,000 a year, which is obviously nobody makes that much money. That's a crazy amount of money to be making. Yeah, you'll be taxed a lot more. And also property taxes are going to go up, but that's only if you own homes or if you're renting. So don't worry, this is all going to be fine. If you want to contribute, help us to kind of get that budget leveled out. You can donate here at coveredincome.com. Let's get some people's income covered, and you in turn will get covered income. Seeing a lot of frowny faces. Let's.
That is actually, obviously that's mocking it, but that is actually true. Zorhan has had to back off essentially all of his free promises and instead raise taxes. And $122K in New York, that might sound like a lot depending on where you're at. In New York, that is like just barely above poverty class. All right, I had a specific video. Oh, I remember where it is now. Hang on. Let's go. Jeffries. Oh, well, that one goes to the point, but it's not the one I'm looking for. All right, here it is.
Parker of Philadelphia gained a bit of infamy after she butchered the spelling of Eagles, as in the football team.
Well, listen, we've got to do this. Let me hear you all say E-L-G-S-E-S, Eagles!
To her credit, she took the rooting of the Elgsis in good stride.
I'm sure you haven't heard the last of it, but it's all good fun, right?
Hey, listen, I'll tell you this. If they didn't know who the mayor of Philadelphia was, they sure know now. Okay, nothing is possible when we work together as a team.
But she's back in the news after a bizarre exchange with local reporter Claudia Vargas.
Since taking office in 2024, Mayor Sherelle Parker has stayed away from calling Philly a sanctuary city. When asked last year, Mayor Parker said,
"We are officially and firmly a welcoming city."
What does the term sanctuary city mean to you, Mayor?
What I want to tell you about Philadelphia, and this is extremely important, that you, Claudia Vargas, have been provided an answer to the question that you just asked from our city solicitor. Philadelphia, that means the chief lawyer for the city of Philadelphia. Renee Garcia is our city solicitor.
What? This may seem like a non-answer, but what she's saying is, a city solicitor answered this question of yours already.
A spokesperson sent a statement from the city solicitor saying in part, sanctuary city is a broad term with no official definition. The city of Philadelphia does not use the term sanctuary city, nor is there any ordinance, as you refer to, that officially designates the city as such.
And what we are, the term we use to describe our city, is that we are a welcoming city here in Philadelphia.
She went on to read the solicitor statement previously sent to the NBC 10 investigators, and then says this about sanctuary cities.
People have referenced it in relation to funding for the city of Philadelphia.
She wouldn't take my follow-up question, so I tried to get clarity at the end of the news conference.
Mayor, I have a question.
The mayor walked away without answering our other questions.
Is the mayor really
Shocking.
trying to punt on Philadelphia being a so-called sanctuary city? Wouldn't a liberal such as this mayor be delighted to be considered one? Instead, she insists on welcoming city.
A welcoming city. Welcoming city.
Here's the
are
previous
a
mayor of
welcoming
Philadelphia
city.
dancing about being a sanctuary city.
A sanctuary city, yeah.
Ugh. So for Mayor Sherelle Parker to not want to answer a question that would seem so easy for Democrats is a bit baffling and left to speculation.
That was from Daily Caller, as you can see. Yeah. They really are as dumb as you think they are. Probably dumber in reality. As we've seen, the many times that we actually have to go behind the scenes and you have Nancy Pelosi getting herself a beer and her husband, Chuck Schumer grilling raw hamburgers with cheese on them. Because everybody cooks their raw hamburger with cheese on it. Yeah. Anyway. I'm going to propose again what I proposed the other day. One of the best ways that we could fix our legal system, and that I think the Founding Fathers could have improved upon the system, is by not allowing people to run for office. You can't run. You have to be elected to office. Meaning, in order to run for office, you have to be elected by enough people. And then all of those people that are elected from your city or from your county or from your state, depending on what office we're talking about, then they can go to a primary, battle it out with each other, and the best person from there goes on to office. I.e., you cannot choose to run. People have to choose to make you run. Because then we don't get the psychopaths that are just looking to get their name out there, that are just looking for the fame. We get real Americans with real solutions that really care about this country doing good. That's my proposal. In the meantime, because you do have to elect to run for office, God damn it, will some of you please run for office? Normal Americans who, yes, have absolutely better things to do, but you believe in this country and are willing to serve it. If you'd like to, write to me at JBU@USA.com. I'll have you on the show. We'll get your campaign started right here. Do we want to talk about some guns some more? We probably should, because I know Alan doesn't really. It's not that he doesn't like guns. He just it's not his thing. So I don't want to see the blank stare come over his face when we start talking about him in front of him. I talked about this last night. As a law-abiding, responsible American, it is your duty to own a firearm. That means, in 2026, an AR-15, specifically. Every law-abiding, able-bodied male citizen of America should own no less than one AR-15. That is your responsibility as an American citizen, according to the Founding Fathers, not to me. And the reason it must be an AR-15 is because, one, it's what they're trying to ban. And so that's why it's first and foremost important, because even if they ban them, they can't take away the ones that exist. And two, if we had to send you to war tomorrow, what would we hand you? It's not because it's an effective killing machine, because it is the best compromise of all things. I talked a little bit last night about what that should mean. Don't buy an AR-15. If you're only going to have one, don't buy an AR-15 that's under $1,000. Go with one of the well-established quality ARs out there. It's going to be between, you might be able to get it for as little as $1,000, but it's going to be between $1,500 and $2,000. A DDM4 is what I recommend for anybody that, you know, you don't plan on being a big gun guy. You just want to make sure you get the right thing. Get a DDM4. You can't go wrong. It's a solid gun that is reliable. It's a little tad bit overpriced, but you literally can't go wrong. It's a great company, good Pro 2A company that is also important. Sig Sauer is not. I wouldn't say they're anti-2A, but because the government is one of their biggest contractors, there's some problems there. BCM is another one. And then I also mentioned the Knights, the Wilson Combat. And I'll mention again, yes, Wilson Combat sells $5,000 pistols, but their ARs are not anywhere near as unreasonably priced. Regardless, there are plenty more out there too. You know, there are many people that do all sorts of videos on ARs and stuff. You can go and find out, but don't get just a dirt cheap one. Like, there are plenty of reliable cheap AR-15s. As I mentioned, Diamondback makes a great AR-15 for under $1,000. If it's going to be your first AR-15, go for it. But if you're only going to get one, or if you have multiple, but you don't have anything that is a rock-solid, reliable rifle that you can fire 20,000 rounds through, you need to have one. Because if you ever do have to use it for any sort of official capacity, it does have to meet a different standard than it does for just you in your personal life. So that's the AR itself. You can go back and watch last night if you want a little more information. I also, too, just to hit these points, 5.56, direct gas impingement, mil spec. And the reason for that is intercompatibility of parts. I talked about why the 5.56 and not one of the newer, better rounds. And many, all of those details I talked about last night. You can go watch last night's episode if you want to know more about why I came to those decisions. And again, you can comment under the show on Rumble or x.com/JBU_show, or you can email me directly, jbu@usa.com, if you want to tell me why I'm wrong. And if you make a good argument, I'll present it on the show. But the rifle is only part of it. You also need a quality sidearm. And that's for two reasons. One, you can't carry a rifle with you everywhere. You can carry a pistol with you just about everywhere. So it has to include a quality sidearm. Second, if you ever did have to use it in any sort of official capacity, and again, I'm not talking about working outside of the law here at all. Not walking around, I'm not talking about, running around in the woods playing military with your buddies. I'm talking about your duty as an American to be sufficiently trained in shooting a gun and owning the bare minimum equipment necessary to be useful if ever called upon. The sidearm is one of those two things. You need two guns. The rifle must be an AR-15 or equivalent, but ideally, if you're only going to have one, it would be a 5.56 AR-15 and a handgun. Handgun, a lot more options out there. Ton more options. The rules that I would lay out for a handgun are striker fired, 9mm, and trying to think if there's any other specific Those are really the two main. Oh, striker fired 9mm and full size or compact full size. So there's three main categories of pistol: full size, compact, and subcompact. Now these categories have stretched over the years, and there have been new categories added and all sorts of things. But when we're talking about a compact or full-size pistol, a full-size pistol is a Glock 17. It is a 4-inch barrel, or 4.19 inch, is roughly a 4-inch barrel. It is a full-size frame, which does not have a specific definition, but a Glock 17 is the standard full-size frame. And generally speaking, has between 15 and 20 rounds of ammo capacity, although that is only going up with time. A compact pistol, the standard example of that. By the way, a P320, same thing. That would be a Glock 17 equivalent. In the 1911 world, even though we're not talking about 1911s, that would just be a standard GI 1911, 4-point whatever inch barrel, 7-round mag in that case. But what are some of the other ones? The M&P. We'll look at some of the decent options in a second. But so you have the Glock 17 P320, 6-hour P226, full size, hammer fired, but full size pistol. That's for the older guys. They'll be more familiar with guns like that. A compact pistol is the Glock 19 size equivalent. 12 to 15 rounds of ammunition in a standard flush fit mag. Slightly smaller grip and stuff. It is usually a 3.5 inch to 3 3/4 inch barrel. Slightly smaller slide. It is one size down from a full size, but for all intents and purposes is essentially the same thing. It is not a compact is not the carry version of a gun. That would be the subcompact. Back in the day, that would have been a Glock 26. Now it's more like a subcompact is more similar, more akin to a P365, Glock 43. Is it 43X? I think. And Springfield Hellcat. On the compact end, the Glock 19 size, that would be equivalent to, on the 320, I think they just call it the 320 compact. On the older SIGs, the Swedish SIGs, that would be a P229. But that is what I'm referring to. It should be a compact Glock 19 size or a full size Glock 17 size. And the only reason to go with the compact is if it's the only pistol I have, I'm going to go with the compact. And the reason for that is because if I do have to conceal carry a full-size frame, I would prefer it be a compact frame than a full-size frame. And it's smaller without giving up any significant. If you can shoot good with a 19, you can shoot just as good with a 17 and vice versa. If you know, that 3/4 inch, or excuse me, that 1/4 inch barrel difference, only the best of the best of the best shooters are going to be able to get any extra out of that 1/4 inch barrel. It should not be a revolver. There's no reason other than you're a collector and it's cool to get a revolver in 2025, 2026. And it should not be a P365 or a Springfield Hellcat. If you're going to conceal carry all the time and stuff, that's great. You should still have a full size for your what do we want to call it? Your American carry, your American setup, your constitutional setup, whatever it is, the base equipment you should have should include either a compact or full-size pistol, and an AR-15. Let's look at a couple examples real fast here. Glock. We'll pull up SIG. Now, as far as the 6-hour P320, because if I had to pick between a Glock and a SIG, I'd probably still go with the Glock if I was only going to have one gun, just because intercompatibility, availability of parts, all of those things. And yes, the SIG is almost exactly the same, and you're welcome to go that route. I have no hesitancy over the 6-hour trigger bullshit. Some people do, and that's fine. I have decided, like, I'm not arguing about this with people anymore, because I'm defending it in this position. I will explain my position this time, but generally speaking, like, please don't argue with me about it, because I don't care. There are over 4 million SIG P320s. There are roughly 250, it's less than 300 ND reports from SIG P320s. That is 0.00001%. I might have said too much. It's 4 zeros and then a 1. No other company keeps track of their NDs. So Glocks could easily have 10,000 ND reports. They don't report those numbers, so we just don't know about it. And I understand. You haven't seen as many videos of Glocks NDing. But that's also because nobody's looking for them. When it's SIG P320 NDs, immediately people assume it's the gun, the video goes online, it's all that's talked about. If a Glock NDs, immediately people assume it's the guy, and they make fun of him for it. There are 0 cases, 0, of a gun going off in a holster or sitting on a table or whatever, without being modified, without documented proof of the gun being modified by anyone other than Sig Sauer, with any sort of documented proof. So let me say that again, because I said it in a weird way. There are 0 cases with documented proof of a gun going off in a holster or just sitting on the table with nobody touching it. There are 0 cases of one going off with nobody touching the gun without the gun being modified, or without some other form of energy being applied to the gun in some way. All the videos that exist online that show people, look, I can make the trigger go off. One of 2 things happens. Either 1, they admit to modifying it on camera, in which point anything you do from that point forward is irrelevant. If you have to modify the trigger to make it happen, even if you claim what you're doing is simulating wear, you can't simulate wear. It doesn't work that way. 2, the gun magically goes off camera before it comes back on and has an ND. There are no cases of somebody taking a gun out of a holster, not modifying it or touching it in any way, and making it go off via smacking the back or dropping it or whatever the way it may be. There was undoubtedly a problem with it being dropped at the very specific angle in the drop test originally, but that was never part of the original drop test. That was never one of the qualifications. It never said it had to be able to drop perfectly on the rear sight and not go off. Once SIG learned that that was a problem, they recalled those guns, they fixed them, they put them back, they gave them back. It has never been a problem since. Nobody's been able to do it with any SIG P320 that has been manufactured after that point in time. The last 2 points that I'm going to point out. One, the overwhelming majority, there are over 1 million police officers in the country. There are well over 1 million soldiers. The vast majority have absolutely no gun experience before becoming a cop or before becoming a soldier. They are not, and like the normal like street level guys, cops more so than soldiers. The average like soldier that is, unless they're infantry or special forces, they get almost no gun training. My former co-host that used to be on the show, Tim, was in the Marines. His MOS was not it wasn't a direct combat role. It was a support role. He set up networks. Now they were combat field networks, so he did have a need to have combat knowledge because his job involved going into combat, but not on the front line. He wasn't infantry. He was in a combat support role. He got to fire, like, at best, 20 rounds every, 2 months. Out of his rifle. Out of the pistol, I think he only did 1 set of training. And I think he said, if I remember correctly, it was 1 set of training, but then when he was deployed, he did 1 set before deployment both times. If I remember correctly. Meaning he went to the range 1 time and got to fire 20 rounds, 50 rounds, whatever it is, to brush up on his pistol skills. The average cop, they get a little bit better than that, but not much. The training and qualification for like an FBI agent is like 100 rounds. Well, to be fair, I believe in the last 5 years specifically, they have upped that because of a lot of issues they were having. But prior to that, it was very little. In the average police department, it is very little. Now, a lot of cops go and train on their own time after, but a lot don't. And they fire maybe 100 rounds a year. The vast majority of cops prior to carrying, or prior to being issued a SIG P320 or a Glock or a Smith M&P, had hammer fired double action either revolvers or pistols. They had thumb safeties. The M&P, the first generation, also had a thumb safety, less chance for NDs in the holster. Glocks don't. Smith & Wesson or 6 Hours don't. The reason the hammer matters is these are called double action pistols. And I wish I had mine handy, but I don't. The difference with a double action pistol is the first time you pull the trigger, it takes a 9 or more pound trigger pull. Meaning it is very hard, very heavy to pull the trigger the first time. After that, every follow-up shot is much less until the trigger goes dead again. To go from that, with very little pistol training, to a striker-fired pistol that has no safety and a 5-pound or less trigger pull with no difference between first round and second round, you should already expect to see some greater level of NDs. I mean, ideally not, but if we're talking about the probability over a million police, one would be pretty stupid to think you're not going to get any. On top of that are flashlights. Flashlights have only become standard equipment on pistols especially for police and military, in the last 5 years also. Many police went immediately from a double action P226 or Smith & Wesson 5907 or whatever it is to a striker-fired pistol with a flashlight. Why does that matter? Well, the flashlight, I can't believe I don't have a pistol next to me. Here you go. The flashlight goes right here. Can you see my mouse? Can't tell if you can see my mouse. Hang on. We'll go full screen. Goes right here. You can't see it. Whatever. It goes on the front, underneath the barrel, on that front portion of the gun right there. To the right of his hands. And what that means is, when the gun goes in the holster, it has to be able to fit the flashlight. And that means that the holster has to have a big, wide gap because traditionally speaking, these flashlights are wider than the frame of the gun. Because they have to have a battery in them. And that leaves a big gap on either side of the trigger on the holsters. Anybody who has a flashlight on their handgun and has a uses a holster with it, which if you have a gun, you should, knows there is a big enough gap there that does not exist on a regular holster. I really wish I would have grabbed one so that I had one handy to show, because it's a big difference. A regular holster will fit nice and tight so that nothing can get in there and accidentally pull the trigger. But if you have a flashlight, that is not possible. And if you have a flashlight on your pistol, you have to be told or learn yourself that the trigger can still be pulled on this holster. And you need to be aware at all times. What do cops carry on their belts besides their guns? Keys, handcuffs, they get in and out of the car, seat belts, all sorts of things that can end up in that holster. And if they're not told or trained to carry their keys on their left side, and they usually carry them on the right, the ignition side, does that mean that all the NDs from 320s are from things like that? No. But there's a good chance that it's a significant amount. When you include the fact that there's over 4 million of them, less than 300 have had an ND. There are 0 documented cases of one going off for literally no reason. All of the videos online that claim to show the failures of SIG 320s, the camera or the gun magically goes off camera before the ND happens, or they admit to tampering with it. I'll carry a 320 without fear. I will. I will. I would have no problem doing so. I don't actually own a 320. I do own a 365. Never had any issue with that, although I don't think anyone complains about them. And they're basically the same gun. Their design is the same. It's just smaller. So you would think if there was a fatal flaw with the 320, it would exist in the 365, but it doesn't. The last thing, I told you there was 2 things I would mention. I only mentioned one, which was the holster. The last thing is the last commercially widely available gun that had a fatal flaw and led to the end of this company. Well, damn near the end. Was the Remington 700. The military used a version or a variant, and it was the most popular hunting rifle in America for a long time. Still is, despite these problems. And there was videos aplenty on YouTube. And I don't know exactly how it worked because I was a lot younger when this was an issue. And so I remember seeing a lot of the videos. I can still describe a couple of the more popular ones to you. But whatever it was when you, it was a bolt action rifle, and when you loaded a bullet into the chamber, closed the bolt, you could just barely touch the bolt itself, and it would make the firing pin fall and fire that round. More than one person died from it. I don't know if it was from like excessive use and eventually it wore down enough that it became really easy. I don't know if it was a fatal flaw from brand new. I'm not sure exactly what the issue was with them because, again, it was a little bit before my time. But I do know that when that was happening, there were tons of videos online, and there was no shenanigans with those videos where the gun magically goes off screen. They were able to make it happen and do it repeatedly in front of the camera. Find me a 320 video where they're able to repeatedly make it go off and the gun doesn't magically go off camera and or they don't admit to tampering with it. The one video that I remember specifically right now was two soldiers. I think they were Marines, but two soldiers nonetheless. They were in country. At least there was sand everywhere. And they were on a shooting range, and he was showing, and his partner was filming, and he'd rack it, put the bolt, and then he'd take his hand like this and just tap the bolt with his thumb. And he could do it every round over and over. The camera never moved. It didn't magically look away and then look back. He could do it repeatedly without it. If the 320 was flawed, you would be able to do that. You would be able to repeat the problem on camera at some point. Somebody would have been able to do it. There are 4 million guns in circulation. Nobody can do that. So for me personally, I know that was a long explanation, but I can already read the comments. For me personally, I'm never going to worry about it. Unless new evidence comes to light. I still reserve that possibility. So nonetheless, as far as a pistol goes, P320 is an option. Let me get pistols up here. Hang on. P226 is an option too. Great gun. One day I will own one. I honestly don't know why I still don't own one. It's one of my favorite guns ever made. But it's pretty outdated at this point. It's pretty heavy. It's hammer fired. I said it should be striker fired. I do mean that. All right, let's see here. What is the 211? Ooh. Oh, I see. It's like a 2011. Sorry, I got distracted. P320. By the way, the P320, M17, M18, same gun. Whichever one. This is the compact. This is the full size. The only difference is it's slightly shorter here to here. You can see the cursor. And it's slightly shorter here to here. Longer. Slightly longer. If you're only going to have one gun, one handgun, I would get the compact because, again, if you had to conceal carry it, it is a little bit smaller and that helps. Otherwise, go with the full size if you already have a carry gun or you plan on getting a carry gun. That's one option. The Glock 17, Glock 19, of course, are always an option. Don't buy a Gen 6. Buy a Gen 5 or before because screw Glock. That's my personal opinion, but I won't buy a Gen 6. They did all that. They did all that without being asked, which is what pisses me off, is that they did it without even being demanded. And it made no difference at all. Somebody adapted a Glock switch to it the next day. This is the 19, this is the 17. So again, you can see slightly shorter here, slightly shorter barrel. Let me get the exact. Yeah, 4.49 inches. I apologize. So up to 4.5 inches would be full size. Generally speaking, 4.19 to 4.49, those are going to be your full size. And then these are usually 3.9 to 4 inch, or excuse me, 3.5 to 4 inch. This one is, a Glock 19 is 4 inch exactly. So there you go. It really amazes me how little Glock does to their guns every generation. Other options, the Smith & Wesson M&P was a terrible gun. The M&P 2.0, though, was a great gun. So if you want to go with the Smith & Wesson M&P, I don't see any problem with that. And just make sure it's a 2.0. They also make these awesome, I want a Bodyguard 2.0. I want there we go, 2.0 full size. They also make them in all metal, which is awesome. I don't understand why there aren't more metal striker-fired pistols. I think they should all be metal, personally, but if you want to get in polymer, too, nothing wrong with polymer. Whether or not you want a thumb safety, that's a personal decision. Some people, think it's the dumbest thing you can do. Others, they just prefer it. Me, I don't use them. But if you want to, I don't see why it's a problem. You can learn how to flip thumb safety off without an issue. It's not that big of a deal. Yes, it is an extra step, so take that for what it's worth, but the other thing that I would say about the rifle, the pistol, and actually everything is it should be American, which I guess is a good reason not to buy a Glock. There are many American Glock knockoffs, like ZevTech, and many others that are essentially Glocks, but made by an American company. So if you want to go that route, you could go that route. And even though I just said it should be American, I am a huge fan of Canik. They make not only a great gun, but they're reasonably priced, and it's really annoying how expensive pistols have gotten. And the reason that's annoying is because it's a finite amount of metal. It is a very simple amount of technology. Unless a 150-year-old gunsmith is hand-making your gun, he is forging the metal in his own forge and hammering out the barrel by hand, it shouldn't cost more than $1,500 ever. For a striker-fired pistol, I wouldn't pay over $700-800. The most I've paid is $850 for a striker-fired pistol. And I shouldn't have paid that much. But I was willing to because it was a local gun shop. I'm always willing to pay them a little bit more than I would order a gun for. So, don't get a Canik. But if you want to get a Canik, they're nice guns. For the price, you usually can't do much better. And the trigger, for the price, you usually can't do much better. But if you're only going to have one, again, you should buy from an American company. I mean, the whole point of this is it's your responsibility as an American. You should probably buy an American gun. Damn it, I like these. Matter of fact, this is the gun that I recommend. Especially if you want a Glock. This is the gun that I recommend. The Ruger RXM. This is everything that everybody wished Glock would do with their guns. It uses the drop-in mechanism like Sig Sauer does. So you can change the grip modules and stuff without having to go through a background check for a new grip. If you're unfamiliar with guns, just understand that's a very nice feature. It allows you to change these components, the grip right here, without having to register it as a new firearm. On any other striker-fired pistol besides, I think Springfield does it now, and Sig Sauer is the one who originated it, you have to register a whole new gun just to get a new grip on a pistol. That's not true with these. And it's not true with the 320, and it's not true with the Springfield Echelon. But the other thing about these is it will fit Glock accessories, including barrels, holsters, suppressor, any suppressor. Granted, suppressors work generally for all of them, but if it works on a Glock, it'll work on this because it uses the same barrel. It uses Glock magazines. They have a deal with Magpul, who not only makes Glock magazines. Some people have heard some negative things. I've never had any issue with the Magpul Glock magazines. I like them because they're half as much as everything else, and they're, for me, have been every bit as reliable as regular PMags. But even if not, you can use any Glock magazine, so it doesn't matter. Of course, the OEM Glock magazines are good too. They're just more expensive. Glock triggers, literally everything on it is Glock. Glock sights. It is the perfect pistol, in my opinion, if you want a Glock. It is everything that a Glock should be. And what I was saying is they have a deal with Magpul. Magpul already makes multiple different grips for them. So you can buy an aftermarket one, especially if you don't like that ugly-ass blue. I think they sell it with the ugly-ass blue for Magpul's benefit, so that you kind of have to go to Magpul and buy a black one. But they're only like $20, so... Jesus, Magpul, no. Oh, what the hell? I want to see... There you go. $40. They're $40. They only have 3 options at the moment, but this gun was just launched like 2 months ago. So give it some time. There will be more. But there you go. So this is the part that is considered a firearm, and that's why you can change the grip out without any issues. And again, all Gen 3 compatibility off-the-shelf parts. So if you already have Glock holsters, you don't have to get a new holster. And finally, the other best part about this is the MSRP. They sell for about $400. Because again, guns are one of the few things where the actual sale price is generally less than the MSRP. One of the best guns, I think, available. And while I haven't got to shoot it yet, I have held one, and I don't see any immediate issues with it. I haven't heard any immediate issues with it. And given the fact that it's based on the Glock, I don't think there will be any issues. I like it because it is a reasonable price, and then all the reasons I just mentioned. They're not trying to screw you. And while Ruger, like many American companies, had a bad name 15 years ago, pretty much everything Ruger makes today is entirely in line. They listen to their customers, and they dramatically changed everything about their company. The PC Charger is a good example of that. This is a great off-the-shelf PCC if you were going to get one. All right. Let's talk about accessories for the handgun and for the rifle. There are a couple major things. For the handgun, you should get a red dot. It's not a requirement. It's perfectly fine not to. You can shoot just as good with iron sights. It does take more practice, and if you are a low-skilled shooter, if you are not a gun person, a red dot is like a cheat code. It is way easier. As soon as you learn how to keep that dot where it's supposed to be, i.e. how to find the dot, because a lot of people, when they use it for the first time, don't understand why they can't see it, and that's because the gun's not lined up properly. Once you get that right to where it's supposed to be every time, it's like a cheat code. It is way easier. It's also, an extra couple $300, $400, $500. So That's up to you. It's not necessary, but it is a good purchase. You need to have a sufficient number of magazines, and they need to be good, reliable magazines. If you're talking Glock, that means OEM Glock mags. Again, I like the PMag Glock magazines. There's some debate on that. Otherwise, usually for a pistol, the best magazines are going to be whatever the OEM ones are. Canics use Beretta style. Sig Sauers use Beretta style. Those are probably the best overall pistol mags in existence, in my experience. I have never had magazines that are smoother than my Canic magazines. You can load 20 rounds into a Glock 17 sized magazine, and every single round comes out smooth as butter. It's just my experience. But yeah, usually it's going to be whatever the stock mag is for your gun is usually going to be the best choice. Whereas with an AR-15, you should have 10 PMags, no less. More is fine. No less than 10 30-round PMags. These guys right here. And this is an airsoft one, but same thing. Quite literally. In fact, I'm pretty sure that this is the exact same case that is on my regular PMags. Unfortunately, we can't have these in Washington State anymore, which is why that's an airsoft magazine, but that is another reason why if you live in a state where it's still legal, you should buy as many as you possibly can. They're only $10 these days. And don't screw around with anything else. There are lots of other decent magazines out there. There are lots of cheaper magazines out there. Well, not really cheaper than $10, but there are plenty of cheap $10 ones out there. There are lots of more expensive magazines. There is no reason to get anything except a PMag. It works flawlessly every time. It's that simple. In fact, you can see this one is actually based on the 40 round. If you want to go with 40 rounds, go ahead, but do not get drum mags. Too high of a error probability. And it's not necessary. I watched a video the other day of I think it was an Irish guy and a Brit. Maybe an Australian guy and a Brit, but I think it was an Irish guy and a Brit. They were fighting on the front lines in Ukraine. And when he asked him about magazine setups and all that, he asked him, what do you do? And he said, my recommendation would be PMags, but have the most amount of rounds you can have in your first mag. And that makes sense if you think about it. You don't want to have to go to a second mag in a firefight unless you absolutely have to. For me, the 40 round would be the best you could do in that case. They do make some 60 round where they stack 4 bullets next to each other to make a 60 round straight up and down magazine. Let me see if I can find it. 60 round. I have never had any experience with those, so I have no idea. Oh shoot, here's some 60 round sticks. Yeah, so it's like this. So it's a quad stack or triple stack. I have no experience, so I have no idea if these are something I would trust my life to. And again, like he said, I would do it for the first magazine. Don't do it for all of them. The 40 round PMags, I have used those many times. Perfectly fine. They're every bit as reliable as the 30 round. There is no different. I would carry all of them 40 round probably these days. The only downside is that they're that little bit longer. It looks kind of funny on the gun, but who cares? Again, that's going to be something that's kind of preference. Some people say it's silly and just go with 30. But if you think about it, combat load is 6 mags plus 1 in the gun. So that's 6 times 7, that's 210 rounds. If you're doing, 7 times 3, 210 rounds. I got the answer right, but I got the numbers wrong, but whatever. If you do 7 times 4, what is that, 280 rounds? It's 70 more rounds without taking up really any more space. They're a tiny bit taller, but other than that, it's not taking up any more space. To me, that just makes sense. And I would bet any amount of money that if you were to put a 40 round and a 30 round PMag to the test, you would have no higher failure rate out of the 40 than you would the 30. Somebody wants to take me to task on that. JBU@USA.com. Let me know what information you have that makes
What's
you
going
think
on, guys?
otherwise.
Jeremy here.
But apparently there is a 60 round, so that's what I was looking at here. This is a 60 round regular double stack, so it's not quad stacked like that other one is. At least it doesn't appear to be. No, they're both ATI Schmeisers. So yeah, like I said, I don't have any familiarity with these. I can't say whether or not they're more reliable or equally reliable, rather. So I would just stick with the 30 or 40 round personally. I would not go with any of these though, because while on like these Magpul ones specifically, the 60 round drum is very reliable, there's just enough of a probability issue that to me, I don't think you're getting enough. Not to mention the $134. Like I said, the 30 round PMags are 10. I think those were 15. All right. So that covers magazines. Let's talk about ammunition. First and foremost, if you're not a shooter or you're a, occasional shooter or whatever, if you're not planning on using your gun for anything other than this requirement, this obligation to have it, then you should fire no less than 1,000 rounds out of the gun, meaning you should train no less than 1,000 rounds of ammunition initially. So what that means is in the first 6 months or whatever amount of time you dedicate to learning how to use the gun correctly, which that's going to depend, and it's going to be hard for me to narrow in on training too much because it's going to vary widely based on your initial skill. Some people just inherently pick up firearms and understand them pretty well. Other people just can't. If you just can't, triple that number. If you pick them up and you're pretty good, 1,000 is fine. And I'm not saying go out and fire 1,000 rounds the first time you take it out. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you need to dedicate to shooting 1,000 rounds in initial training when you get it. If it's going to be your only gun, this is the only reason you have it, etc. Same goes for the pistol. You can probably get away with 500 on the pistol unless you're going to carry it CCW. If you are going to get a concealed carry, since you now have a pistol to conceal carry, then stick with 1,000 rounds too. That's probably going to be about between 4 and 8 training sessions. If you want to get in some classes, that's a good idea. It's a great place to start, at least start with a basic pistol and rifle course. Even a hunter's education course that includes shooting. There are good hunter's education courses and bad hunter's education courses. Generally speaking, their focus is not the shooting, but there are some that do a decent amount of shooting too. But that is probably the best place to start if you've never used a gun. If you have a friend that is an avid shooter, that is a good shooter, that is trustworthy, you know that they are a responsible, safe shooter, that's an okay place to start too, if they're willing. YouTube, of course, is a great resource, but don't rely on it by itself. If you're not sure what to do, where you fall, all that, talk to the people at your local gun store. They're usually extremely helpful. They're going to know the local people in your area. Hey, go to this guy, don't go to that guy, whatever. Let me show you some stuff here in the store, dry fire techniques or whatever to practice with. Dry fire is going to be your number one training, but we'll get to that in a second. And you should go through a dry fire session with whoever. A good trainer will take you through dry fire training first before you ever put a bullet in the gun. That said, all in all, you know, between 4 and 8 times of going to the range, and what you're looking for after your initial, okay, these are the basic rules of safety with a firearm. This is how the firearm operates. This is how to hit a target, you know, all those basic things. The next thing you're looking for is somebody that does classes that are not static, meaning you're not standing there shooting at a paper target. It's got to include some movement. It's got to include a little bit of usually a shot clock to get your heart rate up a little bit, things like that. That would be the most ideal. It's not exactly necessary if, you know, this is just a emergency only and I have this because it's my obligation sort of thing. But if you want to be proficient, that's what I would recommend once you get past the initial. Again, where that 1,000 round count's going to come into play as far as how many trips to the range or how many courses or whatever that is, kind of just depends on who you end up with a trainer and all of that. If you have nowhere to start, go online, watch some YouTube videos. There are lots of people that tell you how to get into it, and go to your local gun store and talk to them. But keep in mind, most local gun stores pretty knowledgeable. Not necessarily on everything, but certainly on guns, like the firearms specifically, and usually pretty knowledgeable about gun-related things in the area. There are also a lot of idiots that work at gun stores. Just keep that in mind. It's usually easy to spot somebody that's talking bullshit, right? I mean, it's usually easy in other things too. It's also easy in guns. If they spend most of the time talking about themselves and stories about themselves and fantastical things that, you know, happen, or I had this customer that did this stupid thing and this stupid that, they're probably full of shit. But just because somebody's full of shit too doesn't mean that they don't know who the good trainers in town are. So keep that in mind. All right. Outside of that, outside of learning how to shoot the gun, you should have any amount of ammo is not enough. We'll put it that way. You should have no less than 1,000 rounds of ammo for your pistol and for your rifle. So if you just have the bare minimum AR-15 and a pistol, full size, 1,000, a case of ammunition for each, basically. No less than that. And I know that sounds like a lot. It's really not. For an avid shooter, that's one trip to the range. For a semi-avid shooter, that's maybe 2 trips to the range. There was a period in my life where I was going and shooting no less than 1,000 rounds every weekend. If I had an ammo sponsor, I'd do that again, but I had to stop doing that because COVID hit and ammo got really expensive. Nonetheless, if you want to sponsor this show and you are an ammunition company, please message me at JBU. What is it? JBU? I don't even know what my marketing email is. Oh, I suppose I should probably take it off screen, huh? JBU.Show at Outlook.com. There you go. All right. So yeah, 1,000 rounds each, and you should commit to shooting, going to the range. If you're never going to carry the gun and you're only going to have it for an emergency or this requirement, then no less than once every 6 months, and shoot 250 to 500 rounds. This is after your initial. If you're only going to go once every 6 months, you should shoot at least 500 rounds a year. So 250 rounds each time. You can do that by going to the range once every 2 months and shooting, 100 rounds, or whatever works for you is fine, but you need to go no less than once every 6 months and shoot no less than 500 rounds a year. It's really hard to just put numbers like that on it because it's different for every person as far as what's going to keep them sharp and what's going to keep them knowledgeable on these things. The amount of bullets itself is not as important as utilizing your training time wisely, and that's going to come down to either talking to somebody smart enough or watching enough YouTube videos or whatever to kind of narrow in, okay, what should I be doing based on my skill set and where I'm at, all of those sorts of things. It's hard when you're not talking one-on-one with a person, to really give that kind of broad advice, but ballpark estimate, that's what I would say. And by the way, with your stored 1,000 rounds that you're maintaining no matter what, cycle that ammunition. So when you go to the range, use your stored ammunition and replace it with the ammo that you bought for the range that day, if that makes sense. Ideally, your stored ammunition should be all the same ammunition. You shoot what you carry. Now, for the rifle, that can be FMJ, because we're talking about, what a lot of people would call a shit hits the fan situation or something like that. And so while FMJ isn't ideal, you don't necessarily have to get the most expensive. But I would, ideally you would get some heavier 68 grain, 77 grain bowtail hollow points or something. But again, that comes down to various factors, including how much you could afford to spend. Regular 5.56, 55 grain Lake City brass, military surplus, essentially. If that's all you can afford to do, that's fine. If that's all you can afford to train with the rifle, that's fine. Because when you're shooting the rifle, the difference between shooting 68 grain and 55 grain, it's not as dramatic. It does matter, and it is going to change where your bullet hits compared to your sight alignment and things like that a little bit, but it's not as dramatic as it is with a pistol. With a pistol, it's extremely important that you train with what you carry, and that should be Federal HSTs or Speer Gold Dots. And yes, I'm going to say just those two. Those are by far the most consistent, reliable 9mm hollow points in existence. FMJs, you should never carry. If you're just shooting target ammo, that's fine. If you're just using them for training and practice, you can use mostly FMJs, but you need to shoot. If you're going out to do your initial training, right? So you take 500 rounds of FMJ 9mm, you should have, or 400 rounds, let's say, you should have no less than 100 rounds of your Speer Gold Dot or Federal HST. And you might say, well, why wouldn't they all be that? Well, it's because they're a lot more expensive. Good hollow points are about $1 a round. It's about 22 cents right now a round for cheap target ammo. So it can add up quickly. If that cost difference doesn't matter for you, great. If it does, then you need to shoot no less than a box each time you go out shooting. And it should be probably the last thing you shoot. And the reason for that is carry ammunition is loaded hotter and differently than cheap target ammunition. It makes less difference with a rifle than with a pistol, but it does still make a difference, and you should still ideally do the same thing. Now, the other thing with the rifle is it's also easier to get the better ammunition at a smaller price difference. And that's partially because the rifle ammo is already more expensive, but it's also because there's just a smaller difference overall. You could, if 55 grain is 50 cents a round, it might be 60 cents a round for some 68 grain VMAXs or something. So when you buy it by the case, the difference is a lot smaller. All right, I don't want to end up giving too much information on that, so I'll move on. We can talk about it more another time if people are interested. But before I get out of here, I do want to throw out a couple more things that you should have. Your gun should have a light. Both guns individually should have their own lights. Ideally, they would be something that is rechargeable, but also capable of taking a non-rechargeable battery. And that way, no matter what, you're covered. You can recharge it if you have that capability. If you don't, you can throw in a regular battery that is good being stored for long periods, and you're good to go either way. There are two companies. When it comes to the rifle flashlight, there are more than two. But to keep it simple, there's two companies. And really only one, in my opinion. Streamlight and, damn it, what's the other one? Oh, I've tested a lot of flashlights, and there are other good ones out there. There are plenty of things that I would use. But when it comes to gun lights, there's Streamlight and, damn it, what is the other one? Hang on. Surefire. If you have the money, Surefire is excellent. Nothing wrong with them. They are a go-to name in gun lights for all of the federal agencies and stuff for a long time. Streamlight is the other one. I will always get a Streamlight. Why? Because they adapt their stuff more often. Hold on, let me make sure I'm talking about... I don't want to be saying the wrong thing. Boom, boom. Surefire. I often say one and mean the other. That's why I want to make sure real quick. Which one is the... Yeah, okay. Streamlight updates their lights more often. And so when Surefire still only had 100 lumen flashlights, Streamlight had more modern 650 lumen flashlights. And it's not all about brightness, but they're also much more reasonably priced. They're still expensive, but there is a reason for that cost. This is a TLR3X pistol light, 500 lumens on their rechargeable battery, 500 lumens on a CR123. This is perfect for a pistol. If this is for a smaller pistol, then whatever the full-size pistol one is. But there are a couple major things. One, a flashlight on a gun goes through recoil. And if you shoot a decent amount, as you should, it adds up. And you will find the flaws in all the other guns. I have tried Ace Beam, I've tried Olight, I've tried... the only one I haven't tried is Cloud yet, and I won't because the cost is just absurd. They want like $700 for an 18650 flashlight. go to hell. That might be an exaggeration. Let me check. Whatever it is, it's ridiculous. Cloud defensive. Products. Weapon lights. Well, they have some cheaper ones now. But yeah, the Rain, $369. It's 1200 lumen. It's just too much. Surefire is about the same, and that's why I won't buy a Surefire. Oh, look at that. I mixed up Surefire. Surefire, $800 for an X400. And this is one of their more modern, brighter ones with the laser. You can get it with a laser, without a laser. That's up to you. On the AR, you should have an IR setup these days, but if you don't have infrared yet, then you don't need to spend the money on it yet. Infrared is ideal. You don't have to have it if we're talking about you only have this for this requirement and nothing else because it's just too expensive still. If it is something that you take a little more seriously, then it's silly not to these days. But as far as the regular visible beam laser, that's a choice. I guess in cloud defensive, I've never used them. People say that they're every bit as reliable. You can do your research on that. But you can't go wrong with a Surefire or Streamlight, and I won't buy Surefire because these prices are just absurd. Again, it's a finite piece of technology, and while they are extremely reliable, they're not worth that kind of money because there are at least a couple other brands. An Olight, if I had to buy on a budget, Olight is probably the budget one I would get. I've had a few. I've never had an issue with them not working. What I don't like about Olight is that they do the step down bullshit where it's a 1300 lumen flashlight, but really it's a 650 lumen flashlight. It's only 1300 lumens for 30 seconds. And that's how they get huge numbers but claim long run time. It's all nonsense. I much prefer a single brightness, on off, rock solid reliable. Streamlights never let me down. That's what I would go with. Much more reasonable $200-300 range instead of $500-600 and beyond. It's still a lot for a flashlight, but for the pistol and for the rifle both, there are lots of details, and at some point I will do a breakdown on flashlights because there are lots of details that matter about a good gun light. The other reason you want to go with Surefire and Streamlight is because it's not just about the brightness. It's not just about the reliability. It's also about the beam. If you have the wrong kind of beam, it can be absolutely useless to you. To give you an example, there are two major types, and this is the CID. That's what that number refers to, and it's basically the concentration of the beam. If you have a beam that is not concentrated at all, which is typically what is referred to as a flood type light, meaning it releases all its light in a short distance, you get a very bright lit up area right in front of you, and you can't see dick beyond 15 feet. If you're clearing houses, that's what you want, because you get all the light right there. It's nice and diffused, so you're not getting shit shining back at you as badly. But if you're outside in the woods, you can't see anything beyond 15 feet. You're better off not using it. Almost. If it's really high CID, meaning a really highly concentrated beam, you can see really great 400 meters down there, but you can only see this tiny little focal plane all the way down there. And everything off to the sides, you can't see anything. If you've ever had a couple different flashlights that have different things, you know what I'm talking about. You've seen it before. If you had an old school mag light, you know, where you could rotate it a little bit, like this one. This is actually a newer LED one, but same thing where you could rotate a little bit when you shine it at the wall. that little concentrated bit at the center that got bigger or smaller when you did this, you see, completely blacks it out or whites it out. That would be the beam strength, right? That would be the focal plane of the beam. And so the downside to that, of course, is A, if you have anything close to you, you can't see it at all. And B, if you are indoors and you got a wall 6 inches from you, you're going to blind yourself more than you're going to blind the person you're aiming the flashlight with, because that beam is so concentrated, it's bouncing back off of things that aren't even reflective. So what you want, obviously, is a good mix of both, ideally. I've tried everything under the sun when it comes to flashlights. I've tried, running a household setup with just a flood. I've tried running an outdoor setup with just a strong focal beam that has a little bit of flood. I've tried everything. And when it comes down to it, you don't want to have to be screwing around with changing any settings. You don't want to be in a situation where, okay, this is normally my gun that I would only use in the house, but now I've got to run outside because there's a bear or something, on the property, and I can't see dick. So you want a beam that is designed to do both and is perfect for both. A proper beam will have a nice flood for your immediate area to cover a large enough area that you can see a big window, but it still has a strong center beam that can reach out and see things that are a little bit farther away. Not a lot of companies get that balance right. And that's why going to a company that focuses on weapon lights is important, because they understand the importance of it not blinding you too. They understand the importance of needing to be able to see in front of you and far away. So yeah, just keep that in mind too. And you don't want the highest brightness possible. What you want is the highest brightness that battery type, whatever flashlight you're going with, because obviously a pistol has to have a smaller battery than a rifle light. Whatever battery type you're going with, you want the highest brightness that has a good runtime. On a pistol light, you're looking for at least a 1 hour runtime. You don't really need more than that, because your pistol shouldn't be out as your sole dedicated piece for much more than that. And if it is, it's not that hard to know, okay, I'm going to need this a lot. I might need an extra battery or whatever. On your rifle light, at least for me, I like one that has, first of all, 2 settings. I know I said you don't want to be screwing around with settings. I like one that has a high-low setting. So 2 settings, high and low. I want it to have a single on-off switch where I'm not messing around with trying to flip through 3 different settings and all that. I want it to be on, high, off, and if I want to switch it to low, I don't mind doing a combination or whatever, but that's just me. You'll have to work out what works best for you. Nonetheless, roughly about 1,000 lumens is what you're looking for in your rifle light. That seems to be a good balance where you're getting, out of an 18650, you're getting 2, sometimes 2.5, 3 hours worth of battery life. On some newer batteries, they even claim more than that. But you're still getting plenty bright enough where you're not blinding yourself, and you're also able to see a good distance, several hundred meters. So what I've found is about, I think the one I carry is 1100. Now, having said all that, the reason I like a 2+ hour runtime on, because you could probably get away with an hour too. But again, that's, if your runtime is 3 hours, that's 3 times, or if runtime is 3 hours versus 1 hour, if your runtime's only 1 hour, that's 3 times more batteries you got to carry if you're planning on using it for more than an hour. I've been out in the woods plenty of times where the only flashlight I have is my gun light. And 1 hour is just not enough. Because, of course, it's never a full hour either. You know, you either can extend it by turning it on and off. You can run it on a lower setting, but then you're really limiting yourself. And that's why when I say high-low, I don't actually want a super low setting. I want a high maximum output. I have, you know, a threat to deal with. And I want I'm going to be walking around in the woods. I need it bright enough to see, but longest runtime. So usually like a 50%, 70% output. And there are flashlights out there that have that balance, that balance all of these different characteristics. It is important. It is the only way that you can see in the dark. Take your time with the flashlight and make sure you get the right thing. If you get the wrong thing, exchange it. Accept the fact you wasted money on it. Buy the right thing. It is worth having because you don't want to be, even if you're not expecting any danger, just being out in the woods and not being able to see in the dark, it's some scary shit. All right. So yeah, a flashlight on both guns. An optic on the pistol is optional. An optic on the rifle is not. There's basically two options that I've kind of settled on as the right way to go for an optic, and I'm gonna have to leave it at this. We'll add everything else tomorrow, since I ranted too long about flashlights. But this is what I'll say about the optic, and I'll show you my favorite choice, or my two favorite choices, I guess. I put a lot of effort into researching these as well. The most common thing these days is a red dot. Just a simple red dot. Works great. Battery lasts more than long enough with shake-awake technology and stuff. They work with night vision. If you can afford to run night vision, they... just everything about them is nice, simple, straightforward. Even people that are poor shooters can shoot well with them. The downside is there is no magnification whatsoever. Which, not a downside if you're working close quarters only, but our rifle can reach out 500 meters. You should probably be able to reach out to no less than 300 with reasonable accuracy. So, what I recommend is what are called, is two different things. You can use a red dot or a holographic, which is the same thing, just a different style. They are different, but for all intents and purposes, to somebody that doesn't care about the differences, they're the same thing. Just watch the battery life on holographics. Make sure you get a modern one, is what I mean, that has good battery life. And you got to have a magnifier with it. And what that is a little flip-up piece of glass that adds some magnification. It looks like this. This would be a standard EOTech holographic with a pop-up magnifier. And you can pop it out of the way. You can pop it right back. You don't have to re-zero or anything like that. You can take the magnifier off and put it back. And as long as you put it back in the same spot, you don't have to re-zero because you didn't touch the sight at all. You only moved the magnifier. Now, if you move it farther back, you might have to make some adjustments. But, yeah, it's good to go. This is a good option. You can also get into it for a lot less than $1,500. EOTechs, though, are rock solid reliable. You're not going to have any issues. You can drop the gun on the EOTech and it will keep firing. Or it'll stay zeroed and stay on target, allow you to keep firing, is what I meant. That's one option. The other option is what are called... the other option is what most people would recognize as an ACOG. ACOG is made by Trigicon, and they look like this. Trigicon makes great stuff as well. They're rock solid reliable, blah, 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 blah. But they primarily sell to the military, and because of that, are stupid expensive. So again, if price isn't a concern for you, that's great. If it is a concern for you, then you're probably not going to be able to get a Trijicon ACOG specifically. ACOGs are basically like the next step after red dot, where you get a little bit of magnification, you get a little bit of graduations, but you still have a simple dot in the center. It's still quick target acquisition, etc. And what I like about ACOG specifically is this right here. So this is their standard, 4x32 or whatever. Very similar to what the Marines use. It's got the little window right here, and that's because these don't require any power. So they're a magnified optic. They have a colored dot, but they don't require any light. Moonlight is enough to light up the optic inside. That's pretty cool. But it's also $1,600 bucks. Again, it's rock solid reliable, but take that for what it's worth. For a 4x32, that's pretty expensive. There are a few other options here, and the newest is what is called, and I've been trying to find it because I can't remember the name. It's like a type of red dot, basically, that has some magnification. Prisms. These operate on the same principle as the ACOG, meaning they don't typically require batteries, although some do use them. It'll still work. The reticle is etched, so even if the battery dies, it'll still work without it. There are some that are solar too, that's fine. They're more reliable because of the way that they're built than a red dot as far as like drop capability and stuff. And $649 bucks. That's less than half the price of the ACOG. It's about a third of the price of the ACOG. It still gives you, so this is 5X right in the middle. It still gives you the ability to see those farther distance targets a little bit easier. While you can shoot 500 meters with a red dot, if you don't have great eyes especially, that 5X is going to help a lot. That 3X magnifier, it's going to help a lot. So yeah, these are fairly new to the scene. There are only a few different models that exist. Vortex is well known for affordable optics that are reliable. Take that for what it's worth. This is what I would recommend specifically. And it's spendy. That's the biggest thing. That's its biggest drawback. Give me 1 second while I find it here. Gotta be under scopes. This one right here. So the other option that exists, and actually I shouldn't have taken us off Vortex here. Hang on. Go back to Vortex Optics. This is the other main category. Something like this, which are called something. I can't remember the name of them offhand. It's inevitable to happen anytime I'm talking about anything. I can hear somebody yelling at their screen right now. It's called a something. I know it is, but I can't think of it. Trying to see if it's got it in the thing at all. Of course it doesn't. It's just yada yada. LPD or LMPD or something like that. Anyway, the point is, they're like half rifle scopes. Many have a red dot similar reticle. This one does not, but a lot of them will have a more simple dot in the center. And they usually have a small amount of magnification that allow you to shoot that farther distance much more comfortably, but still have reasonably quick target acquisition up close. I really wish I could remember the name of these stupid things. See, this one's, there you go. It's got a more traditional dot like that. LPVO, that's what they're called. LPVOs. They've become increasingly common. People like them a lot. It's a little bit overkill for the type of rifle I've recommended for the 500 meters that I've said that you should kind of set your standard on. The other downside is ideally you would have a co-witnessed red dot or at least flip up irons, either 45 or whatever with these. Not necessarily co-witness, but you would have a set of backup red dot or irons or whatever. And so that's why this is my recommendation. This is the Voodoo by EOTech. It's $1,000. However, with the full package, it's more like $1,600. But that's because the full package includes a red dot. And so this is an LVPO. It is a 3x9x32 scope. It's got a quick adjust on the magnification. It is very small. Compared, a regular LVPO is 4 to 5 inches long. These are like 3 or 4 inches long. What is it? Okay, apparently I got my inches wrong. This is 7 inches long, which would make a regular LVPO, I guess, between 9 and 10 inches probably. Yeah, that sounds about right. Of all the things I've looked at, this seems like the best choice in the middle of the road here. It's got a good reticle, a nice simple one. It allows you that little bit better at a distance, and allows the co-witnessing of the... In fact, it looks like it's available with a couple of reticles. That one's a good option there, though, because you got the single dot. It allows the red dot up here, and it's made by EOTech, so you know it's going to be rugged. And apparently it's compatible with many ACOG mounts. So if you can spend up on it, that's what I would do. Otherwise, a red dot with a magnifier, that's probably going to be the cheapest option. Or a prism. One of those two, great option. I don't see any issues. The last thing I would say is that I would include a set of backup irons with it. No matter what you choose. Even if you have the extra red dot, it never hurts to have the backup irons, and I would make sure that they are co-witnessed. And what that means is if I've got to go to my backup irons, meaning I have flip-up iron sights back here and up front, I don't have to take my reticle off to use them. I can just flip them up and go. Takes a little bit of lining up. It's not that big of a deal. That said, if you are going to co-witness them, make sure that you do it with the reticle in place, because the magnification on the reticle can change how you line up the sights. All right, that's it for the guns themselves. There's a couple other things. There's really only one major thing I can think of that I will recommend, but we will do that tomorrow. And I'm looking to see. I don't think I have anything else that we had to get to tonight. Checking real quick here. Oh, look, it's working now. Nope. Nope. Yep. All right, guys. Don't forget to check out my co-host Austin Show at millertalk.substack.com or millertalk_pod on X. Don't forget to check out my other co-host show, Allan at First Allan 2 on X, the American Sincerest podcast, which you can also find on X. And don't forget to check out our show at x.com/JBU_show. Anchor.fm/JBU is where you can find the archive for the audio podcast, as well as all the links for the show. And the audio podcast is available on Spotify and YouTube, or Apple Podcast, all that. The show itself is available on all the places you know where to find it. There you go. Oh, I don't have Austin's on there. I gotta get Austin's on there. Anyway, I gotta fix that. It takes too long. There we go. With that, my name is Chris, and this has been the JBU Show.
Bye, 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 bye. Wait, I want to be a little bit louder.
Yeah.
This is only between us.
This is just between us.
This is just between us.
Perfect, perfect, perfect.